Chapter 1051, Three Supreme True Inheritances. Chapter 1051, Three Supreme True Inheritances. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Be it Dang Hun Mountain, Luo Pa Valley, or Wisdom Gu, they were priceless treasures, unique in this world, exceptional in their domains. Fong Yuan said they could be traded, but what could Xianxia Land's spirit use to buy them? Fong Yuan did not reject him, he was waiting in anticipation. Xianxia Blessed Land had a deep foundation, it was not simple. It had survived the eras of two venerables and existed up to this day. After Imperial Court Blessed Land was destroyed, it could be called the number one Blessed Land in the 5 regions. When he was alive, the land's spirit was known as the number one refinement path immortal of all times. He faintly surpassed old eccentric Tian Nan and old immortal Kong Ju. Such a character, how could he not have anything worth trading? Like immortal Gu transactions, each one was unique. Unparalleled items could be exchanged using similarly unparalleled items. The assessment of their value depended on the individual's own circumstances. Dang Hun Mountain, Luo Pa Valley, and Wisdom Gu, these three were not objects that Fong Yuan would not trade away, as long as the gain was worth it. Xianxia Land's spirit started to pace around. He frowned, entering deep thought. If it were the previous land spirit, there would be no need for consideration, he would trade with Fong Yuan. But after changing personality, this new Xianxia Land spirit had a different focus. The white-haired land spirit was formed from the obsession about space escape Gu, thus he is only interested in refining Gu, he nurtured all of the hairy man Gu immortals to be refinement path experts. But this black-hair land spirit wants to turn hairy men into the dominant race, I can make good use of this point. Fong Yuan thought, seeing this land spirit walking around, he patiently waited for his decision. Fong Yuan had a sense of confidence. He believed that Xianxia Land spirit would not disappoint him. As Fong Yuan had expected, after struggling, Xianxia Land spirit made up his mind and decided to trade with Fong Yuan. First Supreme Elder, I am not doubting your ability to trade with me, but it has to suit both of us. If the things you have cannot match my expectations, I am afraid. Fong Yuan purposely said. Xianxia Land spirit stared as he said grumpily, don't worry. My Xianxia sex treasures are not inferior to those three things. Saying so, he handed Fong Yuan an information path Gu worm. Fong Yuan stretched out his arm, receiving this Gu worm. This Gu was like a silkworm, although it had a head, thorax and abdomen, 3 distinct parts, its body looked like a cocoon overall, round and cute. It was white and looked like a vase, with a shiny glaze on the surface. Fong Yuan held it in his hand, it was smooth and shiny, it had a good feel to it when handled. This is a bookworm. Fong Yuan was slightly shocked. He had seen bookworms before, they were a type of valuable rank 1 Gu. But what shocked him was, this bookworm was emanating rank 3 aura. Xianxia Land spirit snorted, saying, this is something my previous self made. He broke the limits of the rank 1 bookworm, developing rank 2 and 3 versions of it. But what use do they have? If enemies attack, can the bookworms defend us? Even though he said that, Fong Yuan could hear vague smugness hidden in Xianxia Land spirit's tone. Fong Yuan shook his head, without speaking, he used a trace of the unlimited primeval essence in his immortal essence to use the bookworm, as well as sending a portion of his consciousness into it. He did not own the bookworm, but he had borrowed it from Xianxia Land's spirit, thus he could use it without obstruction. Fong Yuan's eyes were shining. The information in the bookworm made him extremely excited, his heartbeat rose. As I expected. Fong Yuan praised in his mind, his thoughts were frothing about uncontrollably. Fong Yuan had returned to Xianxia Blessed Land and spent a lot of time recuperating, at this time, his immortal aperture's calamity was around the corner. Ingwu Xie, He Lu Lan, who immortal Blessed Land, fixed immortal travel, all of these things did not matter now. His biggest obstacle was to pass this calamity. Once in a while, calamities and tribulations descend in a Gu immortal's immortal aperture. The deeper the foundation of the immortal aperture, the stronger the calamities and tribulations. Fang Yuan's current immortal aperture had not been managed yet, it was empty. But it had an incredibly huge space, and a large time path foundation in it. It was even not limited by the separate natures of the 5 regions. Such an immortal aperture far surpassed the 10 extreme physiques combined. The calamities and tribulations he was going to face would be unprecedentedly dangerous. One could say, this was a sharp blade hanging around Fang Yuan's neck. When he was recuperating, Fang Yuan had been training Fang Zheng as well as considering his circumstances. There was only a few days until the calamity. Fang Yuan did not have much confidence, he was uncertain about it. Most of his immortal Gu were left in his original body, a number were destroyed, while the others were left within Wuxia. Fang Yuan's strength was much lower now. Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan were nowhere to be found, while Fairy Li Shan and Blazing Heaven Demoness were dead. The only help he could get was from Langya Blessed Land. And Langya Blessed Land must have survived a lot of calamities and tribulations after existing for so many years. It was a successful example that had dealt with many tribulations. There was bound to be much for Fang Yuan to learn from it. How is it? Langya Land Spirit smiled and said. He raised 3 fingers at Fang Yuan. My Langya sect has 3 major foundations. Firstly, the refinement path true inheritance left behind by my main body, it has the essence of my entire life's cultivation. Secondly, the luck path true inheritance left by Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. Thirdly, the theft path true inheritance left by Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable. When my main body was alive, I had refined Gu for these 2 venerables. The payment I requested were one of each of their true inheritances. Fang Yuan gave a slight nod. The bookworm recorded details of these 3 true inheritances. No matter which one, they were deep and profound. Fang Yuan only saw their most superficial information, and was already deeply attracted by them. They were extremely valuable. Langya Land Spirit continued, among these 3 true inheritances, the Thieving Heaven true inheritance is the least valuable. That is because my main body created space escape Gu, but could not activate it, thus, I returned a portion of the payment. However, Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable's true inheritances all come in pairs. If you are lucky, after getting this true inheritance, and if the other true inheritance is not obtained yet, you might get clues to the second true inheritance. Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable left behind a total of 10 true inheritances, but only otherworldly demons can receive most of them. Only the one I have is an exception. Fang Yuan, you are an otherworldly demon, you can easily obtain the other Thieving Heaven true inheritance if it is still available. Fang Yuan gave a slight nod. He had seen the power of Formless Hand. Using theft path methods, he could steal the immortal Gu of others, and gain the greatest benefits after every battle. And some methods that Fang Yuan relied on greatly, Unfamiliar Face, Vaguely Familiar Face, and Familiar Face, were also Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable's immortal killer moves. Fang Yuan had experienced the benefits of stealing. This true inheritance would not disappoint him. After pausing for a while, Langya Land Spirit continued, Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable had a total of 10 true inheritances, but Giant Sun Immortal Venerable only had 3. When I was alive, I refined the Immortal Gu House 88 True Yang building for him, thus, this true inheritance's value is higher than Thieving Heaven's. Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's 3 true inheritances encompass all of his methods regarding luck path. They are self-luck, all living beings' luck, and heaven and earth luck. Among which, the self-luck true inheritance is with me. The all living beings' luck true inheritance was inside Imperial Court Blessed Land. As for the heaven and earth luck true inheritance, it is in Longevity Heaven. Self-luck, all living beings' luck, heaven and earth luck. Connect luck Immortal Gu, break luck Immortal Gu, divert disaster Immortal Gu, they were part of the all living beings' luck true inheritance. After Imperial Court Blessed Land was destroyed by Fang Yuan, some of these immortal Gu were sent outside. As for the details of cultivation involved in it, they were already lost. Fang Yuan and Ma Hongyun had interacted. He knew about the power of luck path. Ignoring other things, if I had divert disaster Immortal Gu, I could mimic Imperial Court Blessed Land and send my calamities and tribulations outside. Fang Yuan knew that luck path was very useful for his tribulations. Even if this self-luck true inheritance did not have Gu like divert disaster immortal Gu, the higher Fang Yuan's luck was, the weaker his calamities and tribulations would be, he could deal with them more easily. Fang Yuan, I would suggest you take the self-luck true inheritance. Because your luck seems to be really bad. Xianxia land spirit said. Just now, how many problems and mishaps occurred when you came back from southern border? Even on my end, I lost 2 hairy man Gu immortals, you can't even imagine the cause. In order to refine fortune rivaling heaven immortal Gu, old ancestor Shui who ordered the demonic path Gu immortals in snowy mountain blessed land to collect materials for him. This act made the loyalty of his members drop. At a crucial moment, a traitor appeared in snowy mountain blessed land, stealing one of the most crucial materials. Old ancestor Shui who was enraged, he dispatched Gu immortals to capture any suspicious people. The hairy man Gu immortal I sent to receive you was implicated. As for the second Gu immortal who disappeared mysteriously, I have not even discovered what was the cause of his disappearance. I believe that one day, the truth will come out. They will not be sacrificed in vain. Fang Yuan urged. Xianxia land spirit gritted his teeth, he did not continue this topic, he went back to the previous one. Actually, it seems to me that the true inheritance which suits you the most is the first one. Refinement path has 2 styles, do you know of them? I have heard of them. Fang Yuan said. Xianxia land spirit continued, the 2 styles are the hairy man heaven and earth style, and the human isolation style. Us hairy men refine Gu differently from humans, we can use the Tao marks of heaven and earth to create the most conducive environment to refine Gu, and increase the chance of succeeding in the Gu refinement. Fang Yuan listened patiently. Xianxia land spirit would have his reasons for saying this. Back then, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable and Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable had requested help from my main body. That was because my main body used the hairy men heaven and earth style to refine Gu. The success rate of refining Gu was higher than your human isolation style. My main body not only knew the essence of the hairy man heaven and earth style, I even used old immortal Kong Ju's true inheritance to break past our limits, reaching a higher level. I conceptualized an immortal killer move, called Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. Fang Yuan's eyes shined, he felt deep interest. Xianxia land spirit smiled with great pride as he continued explaining. As it turned out, this killer move, Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture, was a refinement path killer move that used several immortal Gu and more than 100,000 mortal Gu to form. It had an ingenious concept. It used the blessed land or grotto heaven as the target of refinement, using the killer move to connect the immortal aperture with the outside world of the 5 regions, influencing the calamity or tribulation and using it to temper the immortal aperture itself. The calamities and tribulations of immortal apertures can have all sorts of strangeness, it makes them hard to deal with. But using this killer move, one can restrict the type of calamities and tribulations that happen. Do you know why Xianxia blessed land was placed around Crescent Lake in the past? That was because the area near Crescent Lake has a lot of water path Tao marks and refinement path Tao marks. My previous self always used the killer move, Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture, to deal with calamities and tribulations. Most often, water path and refinement path calamities would occur. After passing them, the immortal aperture would gain water path and refinement path Tao marks. 180,000 years ago, Xianxia blessed land had no seas. But now, look at this vast ocean, the huge landmass has been reduced to 3 continents. This is the effect of a huge number of water path Tao marks. Fang Yuan heard of this and thought about spectral soul using the myriad tribulations to refine the sovereign immortal fetus Gu. This killer move, Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture, is very similar in concept to spectral soul's method. No, Shadow Sect had spies inside Xianxia blessed land, maybe spectral soul's method originated from Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. Fang Yuan guessed correctly. Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's method was derived from the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. But his methods were more refined, he used Wisdom Path to deduce the type of tribulations before making additional preparations. It was not like this Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture, it could only influence calamities and tribulations, there was a chance of failure. In the calamities and tribulations that Xianxia blessed land went through, there were also fire path and lightning path tribulations, not all were water path and refinement path. Alright, you have Luo Pa Valley, Dang Hun Mountain, and Wisdom Gu. I also have 3 true inheritances. We can do a 1-to-1 trade. Which one do you want to exchange for? Xianxia Land Spirit asked. This time, it was Feng Yuan's turn to decide. What should he choose? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1052, listed on the board, Heavenly Court's Pursuit. Chapter 1052, listed on the board, Heavenly Court's Pursuit. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Central Continent, Who Immortal Blessed Land. Fairy Ziwei slowly opened her eyes. She was adorned in a beautiful purple robe which could hardly conceal her graceful figure. Her eyes were like deep dark pools, with a sense of sorrow shrouding her face. Her skin was white as snow and her black hair hung down to her waist. Her whole body was brimming with rank 8 aura. Letting out a breath, she withdrew her wisdom path killer move and descended from the air. Greetings to Ancestor Ziwei. On the ground, Feng Jin Huang, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly knelt down on the ground respectfully when she saw Fairy Ziwei. The corners of Fairy Ziwei's lips slightly curled up as she revealed a rare smile. The sadness on her face immediately faded and she seemed to blossom with radiance, giving off an immortal beauty that could move people's souls. Huang Heir, get up, no need to stand on ceremony. Speaking of it, your mother and I have some blood relation. From the looks of it, she was extremely pleased with this junior Feng Jin Huang. Feng Jin Huang stood up with a reverential and admiring expression. The person in front of her was a rank 8 Gu immortal. In Feng Jin Huang's mind, she did not dare to have extravagant hopes regarding the rank 9 realm. Rank 8 was her lifelong dream. This Fairy Ziwei in front of her originated from Spirit Affinity House, and had extremely high seniority in the sect. She had lived for at least 1,600 years, she cultivated wisdom path and had joined Heavenly Court. She was dignified and beautiful, and it could be said she was everything Feng Jin Huang admired and was a realistic reference for the latter's ideal goal. Ancestor Ziwei, you have been deducing for 3 months in Who Immortal Blessed Land, did you find anything? Feng Jin Huang asked in curiosity. Fairy Ziwei gave a slight nod. At this moment, she had already descended in front of Feng Jin Huang and was only a foot away from the ground, slowly floating in the air. This was part of her personality, she had somewhat of an obsession towards cleanliness. It was not necessary for her to speak about this to Feng Jin Huang, but Fairy Ziwei still replied, after these days of deductions, I am certain the original owner of Who Immortal Blessed Land, Who Immortal, was a member of the organization Defy. Defy? Feng Jin Huang's pupils shrank in surprise. She might be immortal but with parents who were famous Gu immortals, she was aware of many secrets. She had heard of this organization named Defy. It was a powerful undercover force of Central Continent, made from the secret alliance of some Gu immortals. The 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent held the vast majority of resources and authority, controlling and suppressing other forces or lone cultivators. Where there was suppression, there would be rebellion. Organized forces rebelling against Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects were not few in number. However, these forces usually did not last for long as they were either taken down by the 10 great ancient sects or they disintegrated by themselves through internal discord. However, this organization, Defy, was greatly hidden and was the force that had lasted the longest. It was not that the 10 great ancient sects had not targeted them, but there had been no effect. Most importantly, this organization was hidden truly deeply. Even the members of the organization did not know the identities of other members and only used code names in numbers to address each other. Right now, Feng Jin Huang suddenly heard Who Immortal had been a member of Defy. She was truly surprised. On the surface, Who Immortal was a lone immortal, and she obtained Dang Hun Mountain through fortuitous encounters and coincidence. Looking over it now, Defy was helping her from behind the scenes. Fairy Ziwei continued. Feng Jin Huang's eyes flashed, she recalled the scene when she was miserably defeated and under Fang Yuan's feet, guessing, does that mean Fang Yuan is also a member of Defy? No wonder he appeared back then so coincidentally. Fairy Ziwei, however, frowned slightly. I attempted to deduce this, the result seems to be uncertain. But no matter what, Fang Yuan must have a deep connection with Defy. Huang Heir, you have been avoiding contact with Hu Immortal Land's spirit and haven't become the true owner of this blessed land. Are you thinking of returning this blessed land to Fang Yuan? Ancestor Ziwei. Cold sweat seeped out of Feng Jin Huang's forehead. Fairy Ziwei smiled and reassured, we are family, you don't need to worry. I know Fang Yuan undoubtedly saved Feng Gu. Your father has stunning talents and is astonishingly gifted. He is someone who will leave a deep mark in history. What's more, he repays kindness and hatred, he is loyal and righteous. I understand why he requested this of you. Feng Jin Huang quickly said, Ancestor Ziwei, you are magnanimous. Fairy Ziwei waved her hand, stopping Feng Jin Huang's words, speaking in a slightly meaningful tone, but you need to remember, Fang Yuan is a wanted criminal listed on the Demon Judgment Board by Heavenly Court. Should you want to repay his kindness, you should not overdo it. In the future, I won't stop you if you truly want to return Hu Immortal Blessed Land to him. I can even take responsibility for this. But that will be my bottom line. I hope that you too will not become too persistent and commit a huge mistake. Feng Jin Huang lowered her head, I shall engrave your words in mind, Ancestor. Fairy Ziwei gave a slight nod before lightly flying to the sky. As she flew, a gap opened up in Hu Immortal Blessed Land which connected to the outside world. She then turned into a purple ray of light that flew out like a meteor, disappearing from Feng Jin Huang's sight in an instant. Fairy Ziwei flew straight to Heavenly Court. In Heavenly Court, halls stood tall and upright everywhere. The purple ray of light Fairy Ziwei had turned into cut through the air and entered a large hall. Inside the hall, Fairy Ziwei's main body was sitting cross-legged on a mat, discussing with two other Heavenly Court Gu immortals. The purple light flickered as it landed on her hand. It turned into a will, several immortal Gu and a few beads of immortal essence. The Fairy Ziwei, who had been at Hu Immortal Blessed Land, was merely a will of the main body. This will send the results of the deductions to Fairy Ziwei's mind. Fairy Ziwei stored the immortal Gu and immortal essence into her immortal aperture. She closed her eyes and went through the deduction results. Several breaths of time later, she opened her deep, dark eyes and lightly said, we have already found clues to Fang Yuan. An old Gu immortal sitting in front of her, who was known as Myriad Tidal Dragon, smiled, Fairy Ziwei, you live up to your reputation of being a wisdom path great expert on the same level as Heaven Overseeing Tower Lord. You actually are able to use a will to deduce the crucial clues. The more a will thinks, the more it is consumed. Even Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's special will left in 88 True Yang building had to hibernate to prevent expending itself due to thinking. Fairy Ziwei's method, however, was mysterious and powerful. She used only a will to deduce, and not only did she succeed, that portion of will was not consumed by even 20%. Such an attainment was truly awe-inspiring. Fairy Ziwei's main body had a slightly sorrowful expression. She did not comment on Myriad Tidal Dragon's praise, continuing, if Fang Yuan had not already been managing Hu Immortal Blessed Land for some time, I would not have been able to deduce any clues. Fang Yuan has a close connection to Defy. Although I was not able to obtain Fang Yuan's exact location, I know as long as we follow the clues and eliminate the core aspects of Defy, we will be able to find Fang Yuan. Myriad Tidal Dragon nodded. Fang Yuan has Spring-Autumn Cicada. He destroyed Imperial Court Blessed Land and has obtained inheritances of Red Lotus Demon Venerable, Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable and Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. He is also an otherworldly demon, and was actually able to survive the battle in Southern Border. Such a dangerous variable must be eliminated. But if we want to deal with him, we must first deal with Spring-Autumn Cicada. You can rest assured about this. After I woke up, I immediately made some preparations. I already successfully activated a killer move several days ago and have sealed Spring-Autumn Cicada. It won't be able to activate within 3 months of time. The third Gu immortal present in the hall spoke. His voice was hoarse. he had a middle-aged appearance with dark bags under his eyes and looked listless, giving others an impression of extreme fatigue. However, Fairy Ziwei and Myriad Tidal Dragon seemed to have confidence in him. The latter smiled, "Since you, Wei Ling Yang, have made the move, then Spring-Autumn Cicada is of no concern." Fairy Ziwei spoke, "Then we shall go to Mingtang Valley to capture Gong Sun Liang." At the same time, in Central Continent, at the banks of Pot River, Ingwu Xia was standing at the riverbank, looking at the green willows and feeling the gentle breeze. However, he was feeling erratic inside. After detouring around the collapsed area in Earth Abyss, he, along with Tai Bai Yunsheng, He Lulan and Anew had moved quite a distance before he could use a Gu formation to transport them to the eastern part of Central Continent. This area was under the jurisdiction of Wind Cloud Manor. Ingwu Xia had Fang Yuan's body and as such, was a criminal wanted by Heavenly Court and Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects. However, he still risked staying here and even had been staying here for 3 days. He was waiting for a person. Which person was worth him taking such a huge risk? A green shadow approached them while flying at low altitude. Ingwu Xia's mind jolted, he went to welcome the person. The green shadow landed on the ground and halted. It was not a real person but a puppet. This puppet had a human figure with 2 hands and 2 legs, its body was also robust. But its whole body seemed to be knitted with green grass and rough vines, its head, shoulders, and even its rear had green grass growing all over them, all spiking up like knives. The green grass puppet looked at the Gu worm in Ingwu Xia's hand and recognizing he was its objective, it hummed with a haughty tone, "My master was invited to participate in Ancestor Kong Kong's treasure appraisal event, so he could not come. If you want to see him, you will have to wait 3 more days." Wait for 3 more days. Ingwu Xia's expression slightly changed. What? If you don't have the patience, you don't need to wait, I will quickly go back to inform master. The green grass puppet spoke indifferently. I will wait. Ingwu Xia hurriedly smiled, I have already waited for 3 days, there is no harm in waiting 3 more days. It is just that 3 days later, it will be a whole 6 days. If I somehow am still unable to see your master, then I can only give up on this transaction. The green grass puppet snorted before turning around and leaving. Several steps later, it lightly stomped on the ground, leaping to the air and turning once again into a green shadow. After he left, Ingwu Xia's expression immediately sank, his gaze flickering incessantly as he gazed at the receding figure of the green grass puppet. When the green puppet's shadow was out of Ingwu Xia's vision, 3 Gu immortals appeared from the surroundings, gathering towards Ingwu Xia. They were Tai Bai Yunsheng, He Lulan and Anew. That green grass puppet just now, is it the rumored grass puppet avatar? Tai Bai Yunsheng asked in curiosity. Right. Ingwu Xia nodded, it is a grass puppet avatar, formed from the rank 6 grass puppet Gu with rank 6 battle strength. When Feng Chanzi ascended to immortal, his grandfather, Old Man Bei Feng, gave this grass puppet immortal Gu to him as a gift. Feng Chanzi is wildly arrogant, we waited so long for him and he isn't even coming to meet us. He only sent a grass puppet avatar to meet us. He Lulan was dissatisfied. Anew sighed, saying helplessly, to refine fixed immortal travel, we must have the light of the immemorial era, all Gu recipes of fixed immortal travel revolves around this critical material. And the light of the immemorial era, such a rare Gu refinement material, is one of the treasures of Wind Cloud Manor. We have no choice but to put up with them. Ingwu Xia coldly snorted, but did not speak. He wanted to rescue his main body, and to do that, he had to pass the regional wall. He was not like Fang Yuan, so fixed immortal travel was almost a necessary Gu to pass the regional wall. Right now, he could only endure it. He inwardly thought, Spring-Autumn Cicada has already been sealed, it seems Heavenly Court has begun to investigate me. I can't stay for long in Central Continent, after I refine fixed immortal travel, I need to hurry to Northern Plains and borrow luck from Longevity Heaven. Perhaps I can even make use of the power to conveniently get rid of Fang Yuan. No, considering the time, tomorrow should be the day Fang Yuan has his earthly calamity. The earthly calamity of Sovereign Immortal Aperture won't be easy to pass. Heavens cannot affect Fang Yuan, but can still make arrangements to deal with him. Most likely, not only will there be calamities and tribulations, there could also be human disasters. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1053, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 1/5. Chapter 1053, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 1/5. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. To think that I am back here again. Fang Yuan sighed internally. He stopped flying as he descended from the sky. All he saw was white. An icy land filled with snow. Huff huff huff. Harsh winds blew around him. In this intense wind, countless snowflakes and even icicles were flying around. Because of the blizzard, Fang Yuan's vision was greatly hindered. Because the temperature was very low, Fang Yuan had to use many goo worms to maintain his body temperature, to defend himself from the cold winds. This was still Northern Plains. But the location was at the northernmost end of Northern Plains. It was known to people as the Northern Icy Plain. This place originally had a grassland, but because of a devastating battle by experts, the entire terrain was completely destroyed, turning into a void of complete nothingness. After the battle, the victor, reckless savage demon Venerable, turned into an immemorial desolate beast ice phoenix and breathed out absolute profound ice to freeze and restore this place. Earlier, He Lu Lan chose this place to undergo her immortal ascension and become an immortal. That was because the icy plane had reckless savage demon Venerable's true meaning in strength path and transformation path. When strength path or transformation path Gu masters ascend here, there would be a resonance of Tao marks. The strength path and transformation path true meaning would manifest using the earthly calamity. When the person undergoing tribulation destroys the earthly calamity, they would receive the infusion of true meaning. It was the same as receiving reckless savage demon Venerable's guidance. Memories flashed in Fang Yuan's mind. The image was so vivid, like it was yesterday. But now, times were different. Fairy Li Shan, who had the highest cultivation level, was dead. He Lu Lan and Tai Bai Yunsheng had likely been forced to betray him. Only Fang Yuan was left now. His situation was very different from back then as well. Strength path and transformation path Gu masters can only receive reckless savage demon Venerable's infusion of true meaning once, that is during their immortal ascension. But now, with the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture, I might be able to replicate it again. Fang Yuan thought. He had not done anything like this before. He was not very certain. But after talking with Xianxia Land Spirit, he realized that there was a high possibility of success. He Lu Lan had the great strength true martial physique. During her immortal ascension, the danger was huge. She lost her immortal Gu to barely pass it. My immortal aperture's calamity is probably far more terrifying than hers. Fang Yuan felt immense pressure. If not for the situation, he would not want to undergo tribulation so early. Although once in a while, calamities and tribulations would occur in the immortal aperture, Gu immortals had many methods to deal with them. The most common were time path methods to delay the rate of time of the immortal aperture, to stall the arrival of the calamities and tribulations. But this way, the resources inside the immortal aperture would greatly diminish in production. The gains and losses had to be assessed according to the Gu immortal situation. Xianxia Blessed Land had once used time path methods and modified the tributary of the river of time in the immortal aperture, thus, the time in the immortal aperture was greatly slowed. But this method was not from Xianxia Land Spirit. In the past, Longhair Ancestor had requested the help of a time path great expert. I have too large of a tributary of the river of time in this immortal aperture. I have to undergo tribulation every 2 months in the outside world. Even though my cultivation level rises quickly, and the resources in the immortal aperture grow rapidly, if I cannot endure the calamities and tribulations and die, it would be for nothing. After this calamity, I need to find some time path methods to modify the tributary of the river of time in my immortal aperture. These were all matters for the future. The important thing now was the impending calamity. Huff. Fang Yuan let out a breath as his body shook. A mystical change was occurring in his immortal aperture. Immortal aperture, fall here. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth. A mystical light shone in his eyes. Following a loud sound, his vision changed. Taking a glance, he was already inside his immortal aperture. 5 regions, 9 heavens. It was vast and empty. There were no cultivation resources, because Fang Yuan had not started managing it yet. Only all sorts of gu worms were placed in here. At this moment, these gu worms were flying around Fang Yuan. They were huge in quantity, resembling a giant black cloud. Normally speaking, the immortal aperture was inside the gu immortal's body. But now, the immortal aperture was placed in the outside world, and the gu immortal's body was drawn inside. At this moment, the situation with Fang Yuan's body was like that of a land spirit. He could move freely inside the immortal aperture, but he could not leave. And the immortal aperture itself could connect to the heaven and earth chi outside and stabilize itself. When gu immortals undergo tribulation, they would normally place their immortal apertures in the outside world. There was another situation, that was when gu immortal's immortal aperture had too many resources. If the heaven and earth chi inside were too limited in quantity, they would need to place the immortal aperture to take in and replenish the heaven and earth chi. On the spot that Fang Yuan was originally standing, he had already disappeared. The immortal aperture was placed on the ice and entered a point in space. It could not be seen as it was linked to the empty space. The blizzard was still blowing. There were no changes, as if Fang Yuan had never come. Everything was as per normal. But at the next moment, when Fang Yuan opened the entrance of the immortal aperture, everything changed. In an instant, the entire surroundings rumbled, the glaciers shook, endless heaven and earth chi rushed into the immortal aperture through the entrance. Soon, a vast amount of heaven and earth chi engulfed the place. Blizzards and hail were converted into pure heaven and earth chi. The entrance of the immortal aperture was connected to the outside world. By opening it, Fang Yuan's immortal aperture started to connect to the outside world, drawing in heaven and earth chi continuously. It was like a giant monster lurking in the sea, emerging out of the water and opening its mouth to suck in air. The vast amount of heaven and earth chi rushed in, causing a tremor in the entire immortal aperture, but the magnitude was so small normal people could not notice it. At the same time, the tributary of the river of time started to fuse with the river of time of the outside world. The rate of time of the immortal aperture thus slowed greatly. When immortal apertures were placed outside, the rate of time inside would greatly decrease, converging towards the 5 regions time. Langyip blessed land itself was modified by a time path gu immortal, and was also placed in the 5 regions. The rate of time inside was very close to that of the 5 regions. Many gu immortals would also choose to place their immortal apertures outside and hide inside the immortal aperture in consideration of their lifespan. Out of nowhere, a sensation informed Fang Yuan that the calamity was coming. But because the immortal aperture was placed outside and time slowed down, Fang Yuan could clearly sense that the calamity was approaching at a slower rate. This was normal. Every gu immortals would feel this whenever they had calamities and tribulations. It was like the premonition of an earthquake. Animals would growl and go berserk. It was the signifying of an apocalypse. Heaven and earth chi continued to gush in at a slower rate. The waterfall at the start had become a large river. In just a short while, it turned into a stream. The appetite of the immortal aperture was limited. Fang Yuan was calm. He had rich experience. After seeing the heaven and earth chi, he started to organize his gu worms. Most of the gu worms in the immortal aperture had already been arranged. The important thing was regarding the outside world. A vast number of gu worms flew outside of the entrance like swarms of bees. Even though Fang Yuan could not leave, the gu worms could. Next, he controlled the gu worms and set up arrangements. In a few minutes, the arrangements were completed. Fang Yuan did not hesitate as he injected his immortal essence, activating the gu worms. Immortal gu flew up one by one, shining with bright lights while floating in the sky. The lights weaved together, eventually resonating with the gu worms in the outside world. Finally, a huge blue-colored image was formed. It engulfed the immortal aperture and even expanded into the outside world, covering a huge surrounding area of the icy plain. Immortal killer move, immortal tribulation tempering aperture. Large amounts of immortal essence were expended, over 10,000 were used, but it was just the start. The core immortal gu of this killer move were mostly rank 7. Fang Yuan's green grape immortal essence were consumed rapidly. Thankfully, he had already obtained a large amount of immortal essence stones from Xianxia Land's spirit. He even borrowed heavenly essence treasure Imperial Lotus. 15 minutes later, the killer move was completed, and Fang Yuan's immortal essence was consumed by 60%. This expenditure has greatly exceeded the number that Xianxia Land's spirit said. But he also mentioned that the expenditure was dependent on the immortal aperture's world itself, changing accordingly. Before undergoing the tribulation, Fang Yuan had already consumed more than half of his immortal essence. However, he had already negotiated with Xianxia Land's spirit. He could rapidly borrow immortal essence stones if needed. In this tribulation, Xianxia Blessed Land was Fang Yuan's greatest backer. But it was inappropriate to borrow now. Xianxia Land's spirit would feel suspicious. They had already prepared enough moving perspective cup goo to transport things during the tribulation. As for what the calamity would be, it was unknown. He felt that the calamity was close. Fang Yuan collected his goo worms. He closed the entrance and waited in the immortal aperture patiently. During this period, he checked his goo worms again. An hour later, the calamity descended. The immortal aperture started to shake. Heaven and earth chi appeared from every direction. This was the heaven and earth chi inside the immortal aperture. In an instant, heaven and earth chi clashed as a blizzard formed. Snow was moving wildly as fierce winds flew. In an instant, the immortal aperture turned into an icy world. Fang Yuan saw this and was overjoyed. Did the immortal tribulation tempering aperture method work? Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The blizzard rampaged in the immortal aperture. Snow monsters formed in the blizzard one after another. Snow monster calamity. Slash. Fang Yuan muttered internally, floating in the air as goo worms flew around him, forming a defensive barrier. He shot out flying sword immortal goo. Swoosh. Flying sword goo pierced through a snow monster's head, coming out from the back. In an instant, it flew back to Fang Yuan. The snow monster cried out. The injuries in its head healed on its own as it continued to charge at Fang Yuan. Snow monsters were like mud monsters and cloud beasts. If their core was not destroyed, they were hard to kill. All of these were problematic opponents. Flying sword goo alone could not be effective. But what I am using now is a sword path killer move. Fang Yuan smiled coldly. The snow monster ran for a few steps before growling. Its core had been destroyed. As if its bones had melted, the snow monster broke down and became a pile of snow. Sword path killer move, sword marks targeting death. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1054, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 2/5. Chapter 1054, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 2/5. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan was someone who learned from his mistakes. While traveling to northern plains, he encountered the mud monster and cloud beasts, suffering great losses because of them. Now that he was undergoing tribulation, how could he not fix this weakness? Speaking of which, there was a complicated story behind the immortal killer move sword marks targeting death. When Fang Yuan entered Xianxia Blessed Land, he healed himself while seeking help from Xianxia Land's spirit to reverse refine flying sword immortal goo and the other rank 7 immortal goo. He was a rank 6 goo immortal now. It was very hard for him to use rank 7 immortal goo. Xianxia Land's spirit was very straightforward, because Fang Yuan was a member of Xianxia sect. As an external supreme elder, he was one of them. He gave good advice. I can obviously reverse refine these immortal goo. And to reverse refine them from rank 7 to rank 6 will be much easier than promoting them to rank 7 from rank 6. But don't you find it a waste? Most importantly, reverse refinement would take quite some time. Your tribulation is nearing, there is little time. If you start the reverse refinement now, it will not be done in time. You might as well use this killer move. Xianxia Land's spirit said this as he handed the killer move, sword marks targeting death, to Fang Yuan. You are very lucky. This killer move was bought by my previous self. It is suitable for many sword path immortal goo to use. Fang Yuan felt strange when he heard that long hair ancestor was purely a refinement path goo immortal. why would the land spirit purchase a sword path killer move that he could not use? But after looking at it, he understood why. As it turned out, sword marks targeting death was a killer move that permanently expended the Dao marks in the sword path Immortal Gu to carve them on the target. After the sword path Immortal Gu flies away, the sword path Dao marks would find the target's weak spot and attack it. Like earlier, Fang Yuan used Flying Sword Immortal Gu as the core to use sword marks targeting death and pierce the desolate beast snow monster. This attack was not fatal, the wound caused by the Immortal Gu healed quickly. But the Dao marks it left behind were still in the snow monster's body. It attacked its hidden core and once broken, the snow monster suffered a fatal blow and died. This way, Flying Sword Immortal Gu could kill targets like snow monsters. It no longer worked with little effect against these enemies. But this killer move had a huge drawback. That was the permanent expenditure of the Immortal Gu's Dao marks. Immortal Gu were large fragments of the Great Dao, the product of countless Dao marks. The higher the rank of the Immortal Gu, the larger the fragment of the Great Dao, and the higher the number of Dao marks. The more sword marks targeting death was used, the fewer the Dao marks in the sword path Immortal Gu, they could not be recovered. This way, the Immortal Gu would get weaker and weaker. At a certain point, a qualitative change would occur, and the rank 6 Immortal Gu would turn back into Immortal Gu, or the rank 7 Immortal Gu would become a rank 6. This weakness was severe, it made sword marks targeting death an unfavored killer move. The previous Xianxia land spirit bought this killer move for a low price because he was interested in the killer move itself. In fact, every usage of the sword path killer move sword marks targeting death was akin to reverse refining the Immortal Gu. Except that the reverse refinement was very minute, a large number of usages were needed to produce a clear effect. Once Fang Yuan understood this, he knew why Xianxia land spirit had bought this killer move. The previous Xianxia land spirit's favorite interest was to refine Gu. Fang Yuan thought over it and accepted this sword path killer move. Without question, this killer move was extremely suitable for him now. Winds howled as snow blew around. Sword light entered the blizzard could not block the sharp sword light, it was easily pierced. The sword light drew a beautiful arc in the sky, it hit a desolate beast snow monster's chest, before flying out from its back, turning around and flying back to Fang Yuan. The injuries healed quickly, the desolate beast snow monster laughed, it was about to move when its body scattered, turning into a pile of snow. In a breath's time, dozens of small snow monsters came out of this pile. But these snow monsters were only 10 or 20 feet tall, they were not a problem. Another sword marks targeting death. This move was very effective, desolate beast snow monsters were destroyed in just one hit. Fang Yuan nodded in satisfaction. At this point, he finally experienced one of the advantages of sword path. When Gu masters cultivate, they use Gu, nurture Gu, and refine Gu, these are extremely profound and deep. It is still Flying Sword Immortal Gu, but I changed the method of usage and received an incredibly different result. Again. Fang Yuan used sword marks targeting death again. In the blizzard, desolate beast snow monsters formed again, but they were quickly killed by Fang Yuan. The strength of the snow monsters were related to their size. 10 or 20 feet tall snow monsters could be dealt with by rank 1 or 2 Gu masters. 60 feet tall snow monsters were desolate beasts, they were on par with rank 6 Gu immortals. 70 feet tall snow monsters were equal to rank 7 Gu immortals. These 60 feet tall snow monsters were all killed by Fang Yuan, they were easy targets. Fang Yuan's battle strength was raised greatly, back then in Hu immortal blessed land, he had so much trouble facing the swamp crab, but now against an endless number of snow monsters, he could fight calmly and control the situation. But Fang Yuan did not relax, he was staying vigilant. I am having an easy time because I am using the rank 7 Flying Sword Immortal Gu to deal with desolate beast snow monsters, and also because sword marks targeting death is a powerful move that consumes Dao marks. Furthermore, the swamp crab had brought over Gruel Mud Immortal Gu's effect with it, while these snow monsters have no such Immortal Gu. Fang Yuan's expression focused. He observed closely, after those desolate beast snow monsters died, the new, small snow monsters that were formed were growing in size. 10 feet to 20 feet, 20 feet to 30 feet. These snow monsters were growing stronger. If they are allowed to continue growing, would they become 60 feet desolate beast snow monsters? Fang Yuan did not dare to be careless. He stopped using flying sword Immortal Gu. As he waved his hands, countless dark vortexes flew out. Bam bam bam. These black bullets rained down like a storm. The snow monsters were instantly faced with a disaster. Countless numbers died. But soon, from these smaller snow monsters' corpses, more of them spawned. Fang Yuan killed dozens of snow monsters, but over 100 came back up. Fang Yuan saw this and frowned. He felt troubled. But he observed carefully, although the snow monsters that came back were high in numbers, they were much smaller now. Fang Yuan had a guess. At his will, thousands of green wind blades flew out around his body, shooting out. The wind blades arrived like a huge net, engulfing the countless snow monsters on the ground. The desolate beast snow monsters were intact, but the small snow monsters were sliced into pieces. At once, marks from the blades were on the ground as snow splattered. Fang Yuan activated his investigative Gu. His eyes shined brightly as he observed the battlefield. As expected, once 10 feet tall snow monsters die, they cannot produce more snow monsters. After confirming his guess, he relaxed slightly. Soon after, he had a flash of inspiration. Is this because of the blizzard? Splitting his focus, he activated over 100 mortal Gu in a few breaths' time. A domain of darkness formed from under his feet, creating a dark veil. This was Gu Immortal He Cheng's battlefield killer move, Dark Veil. The immortal aperture could not normally have battlefield killer moves inside. This was because battlefield killer moves had Dao marks. They changed the environment, they clashed with the immortal aperture's own Dao marks and would result in damage. But the battlefield killer moves here referred to immortal battlefield killer moves. Fang Yuan's Dark Veil was mortal level, it was not problematic. He also had Xue Song Zi's mortal battlefield killer move, Snow Domain, but if he used it, it would increase the strength of the snow monsters. It was inappropriate. Once Dark Veil was used, the surrounding blizzard weakened. As expected, the small snow monsters started growing at a slower speed. But this did not last. The blizzard seemed to have been enraged. It rampaged more fiercely. As the snow moved rapidly, Dark Veil was being compressed. It shrunk to Fang Yuan's feet before completely collapsing with a loud sound. Only 20% of the 100 Gu worms that made up Dark Veil survived. They were retrieved by Fang Yuan. Desolate beast snow monsters appear continuously, and small snow monsters appear from their corpses. They would also become stronger at an unthinkable speed due to the blizzard. It is counterproductive to try and isolate the blizzard. Now it seems, I can only get rid of the small snow monsters as well as the desolate beast snow monsters. Fang Yuan concluded. He did not guess wrongly. This calamity was very powerful. This was only Sovereign Immortal Aperture's first calamity, but it had greatly exceeded Hu Immortal Blessed Land's 5th, Blue Charm Lightning Shadow, 6th, Swamp Crab, and 7th, Blood Poison Carrier Flowers, earthly calamities. His immortal essence was continuously expended. As he concentrated deeply, his mind was feeling fatigue. But Fang Yuan was also getting more familiar with using the killer move sword marks targeting death. Time passed. The heaven and earth chi in the immortal aperture continued to rumble. The blizzard formed also was growing immensely. Fang Yuan's expression was grim. He noticed that this earthly calamity was not only huge, it was going to last a long time. It was far stronger than the 10 great catastrophes. Desolate beast snow monsters continued to increase in numbers. Fang Yuan's sword marks targeting death could no longer kill them quickly enough. The newly formed small snow monsters were large in numbers. Fang Yuan had to use mortal killer moves to kill them. He was handling both matters at the same time. It was hard to manage them. Thankfully, these snow monsters cannot fly. I occupy the high ground. Even though I need to deal with the blizzard, the initiative is still with me. The moment this thought flashed in Fang Yuan's mind, the loud screech of an eagle entered Fang Yuan's ears. Fang Yuan raised his head and his expression turned dark. This was bad. In the blizzard, iron crown eagles made from snow were forming. An eagle flapped its wings, charging at Fang Yuan with a ferocious aura. Fang Yuan quickly turned around, using sword marks targeting death to deal with the eagle. But in a short time, 3 more iron crown eagles formed, flying in the air, encircling him. His pressure increased, danger was approaching. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1055, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 3/5. Chapter 1055, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 3/5. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. 3 iron crown eagles charged at Fang Yuan. Sword marks targeting death. Fang Yuan internally gasped to think that at the crucial moment, this had happened. As the activation of the killer move failed, the backlash caused blood to flow down from the corner of his mouth. After all, he had owned this sword path killer move for too short of a time. In an emergency, when he was not focused, the failure rate of activation would surge. An eagle screech resounded, it could burst eardrums. The iron crown eagle in front of him pounced. Fang Yuan quickly dodged, a phantom image behind him flickered as light illusion bat wings appeared, dodging the eagle's attack. But the shield of wind around him was already broken, the iron crown eagle's claws tore through it in a moment. Fang Yuan squinted, he decided to use sword marks targeting death again, and he succeeded. The sword light was extremely sharp, it easily pierced the iron crown eagle's back, and continued to shoot out. Suddenly, cold winds blew behind him as Fang Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He had no time to think further, he used sword escape Immortal Gu immediately. Swoosh, he shot out like an arrow, piercing the sky. By rising in altitude, he narrowly avoided the attack of the iron crown eagle behind him. He temporarily escaped danger. Fang Yuan stopped using sword escape. Sword escape Immortal Gu flew straight, it was extremely fast. Fang Yuan flew into the sky and was more than 10 li away from the iron crown eagle. Letting out a breath, Fang Yuan's heartbeat returned to normal. After regaining his composure, he willed and summoned Flying Sword Immortal Gu. Earlier, he could not recall Flying Sword as it had flown away after piercing the iron crown eagle. There was more than 10 breaths of time needed for it to return to Fang Yuan. As for the iron crown eagle which got pierced, it cried out pitifully as it crashed towards the ground. Before landing on the ground, its entire body turned into a big mushy pile of snow and ice, scattering. The remaining 2 iron crown eagles charged to kill Fang Yuan from left and right respectively, as the blizzard roared. Fang Yuan was unwilling to face them head-on, he used sword escape and retreated. Even though his body was superb, it was not as tough as his immortal zombie body. Sword path was good in offense while weak in defense. Sword escape Immortal Gu allowed Fang Yuan to fly like an arrow, tearing through the sky as he pulled away from the iron crown eagles. The effect was immediate. Even Flying Sword Immortal Gu was not as fast as Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan flew in a circle in the sky before converging with Flying Sword Immortal Gu, retrieving it. Fang Yuan held Flying Sword Immortal Gu in his hand as he injected immortal essence into it. At the same time, he mobilized his Gu worms and activated more than 100 supplementary Gu worms. A profound light was created as it entered Flying Sword Immortal Gu. The 2 iron crown eagles were coincidentally chasing him with one in front of the other. Fang Yuan stretched out his fingers, he felt a small tremor in his hand as Flying Sword Gu flew out. It turned into an astonishing sword light, it seemed to have the power to pierce the universe. Flying Sword Immortal Gu and the Iron Crown Eagles rapidly approached each other. In the blink of the eye, Flying Sword Immortal Gu flew through the first Iron Crown Eagle and proceeded to pierce the second one without any loss in momentum. 2 birds with 1 stone. The Iron Crown Eagle in front flew for a moment before breaking apart. The one behind was still intact, it continued to fly towards Fang Yuan, as if it had an immense grudge against him. Fang Yuan was about to take back Flying Sword Immortal Gu when his mind shuddered. Out of nowhere, a burst of true meaning was entering his mind. Fang Yuan's brows raised, he could not conceal his joy. This is Reckless Savage's infusion of true meaning. It seems that my original guess was not wrong, it succeeded. Fong Yuan was purposely undergoing tribulation in the icy plain, it was for the true meaning of reckless savage. Because in historical records, when Strength Path and Transformation Path Gu masters undergo tribulation in the icy plain, they would receive an infusion of reckless savage's true meaning, obtaining a growth in their attainment levels. But this gift was only for Gu masters when they ascended to immortal. After the Gu master becomes an immortal, the calamities and tribulations happen in their immortal apertures, they would not receive any infusion of true meaning. But after Fong Yuan obtained the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture, he wondered if this killer move would be able to cause the infusion of true meaning. Earlier, when he killed the desolate beast snow monsters and small snow monsters, he did not receive any infusion of true meaning, he thought he was wrong. But after killing the Iron Crown Eagle, there seemed to be an infusion of true meaning, although it was a dangerous situation, he could not confirm it. Now, he could finally feel the infusion of true meaning. A sense of understanding arose in him. He seemed to have turned into an Iron Crown Eagle, from birth, until its first flight, and until it soared the skies. He felt its wings flapping strongly, they had great strength. He clenched his fists like two claws of an Iron Crown Eagle, he looked around, being able to see up to a gigantic distance away. His Strength Path and Transformation Path attainment levels were rising. And his flying attainment level was also rising slightly. The infusion of true meaning was like the guidance of reckless savage demon venerable, without any withheld information. Undeniably, the rise of attainment levels gave great benefits in all aspects. If he trained normally, his attainment level might rise after decades or centuries. Other than dream realms, only something like the infusion of reckless savage's true meaning here could raise the attainment level of someone so easily. In fact, dream realms themselves are the manifestations of emotions, obsessions and desires, they are the remains of countless wills. Once one succeeds in exploring a dream realm, their attainment level would rise, it is the same as breaking free from the obstruction of emotions in the dream realm, without losing oneself, one could extract true meaning from these scattered memories and gain a growth in attainment level. Everything, in essence, is still true meaning infusion. Fong Yuan's eyes flashed with bright light. The Iron Crown Eagle approached, but Fong Yuan easily dodged it. There was only one Iron Crown Eagle left, Fong Yuan created some distance from it and used sword marks targeting death to kill it without any mishaps. Looking over his immortal essence, there was still some left. Even though he used multiple sword path killer moves and rank 7 Immortal Gu, Fong Yuan was well prepared, he was not as desperate as the time he was traveling. He had not borrowed from Langya Land's spirit yet. Most of his resources were in fact spent on the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture. There were no enemies in the sky now, Fong Yuan looked at the ground. The snow monsters stood on the ground, raising their heads and growling at him. The number is higher now. Fong Yuan frowned. At the next moment, countless green wind blades and dark vortexes appeared out of nowhere, shooting down. Like surging waves of a river, he unleashed a terrifying attack that covered the entire area, engulfing all of the snow monsters. Boom boom boom. Explosions occurred continuously. After dozens of breaths of time, Fong Yuan stopped attacking. The huge number of snow monsters had decreased innumerably, the ground had a lot of empty space now, only the desolate beast snow monsters were still around, like dozens of huge pillars. He had only used mortal methods, they were not threatened by them. Huff huff huff. Small sounds were produced, completely covered by the raging blizzard. More small snow monsters emerged from the snow. It has only been such a short time, but these snow monsters are still persisting. Fong Yuan felt this was quite a headache. He could only use sword marks targeting death to kill the desolate beast snow monsters quickly. At the same time, he used mortal methods to kill the uncountable number of small snow monsters. What made him feel strange was, no matter how many snow monsters he killed, be it desolate beasts or not, he received no true meaning of reckless savage. This earthly calamity is very strange, there aren't records of it in history. But at its current strength, it has already surpassed He Lu Land's ascension. At this time, spirals formed in the blizzard, as a change occurred. Cranes flew out of the spirals. These cranes had pure white and clean feathers, they were graceful and had beautiful cries, they were desolate beast 9 palace cranes. Fong Yuan licked his lips, he charged forward with bloodthirsty intent. After killing one, there was indeed an infusion of true meaning infusion. Fong Yuan felt very excited, his eyes were shining brightly. Snow descended, wild winds blew, Fong Yuan engaged in combat with these 9 palace cranes. He moved around rapidly in all directions, he could maneuver agilely as he flew up and down. At first, he fought alone against many enemies, he was pushed back and fell into a passive position. But after killing a few 9 palace cranes, he had more space to move around, he could retreat and advance more easily. As his gains increased, he started to gain control of the situation, he had an easier time. 9 of these 9 palace cranes had appeared this time, they were 3 times the number of Iron Crown Eagles, but they were still killed by Fong Yuan, it just took a longer time. The results were gratifying. Fong Yuan could feel his attainment level rising, he was improving again. This type of feeling towards getting stronger was extremely intoxicating. However, when Fong Yuan saw the uncountable number of snow monsters on the ground, his heart sank again. Earlier, he was only fighting over a dozen desolate beast snow monsters, but now there were 50 to 60 of them. And in the blizzard, more and more small snow monsters were appearing, while the desolate beast snow monsters were progressing to ancient desolate beast level. This situation made Fong Yuan determined to stop it as soon as possible. In this situation, I can only use the 3rd sword path killer move. Immortal killer move, triple layered sword wave. Fong Yuan took in a deep breath, more than 60% of his concentration was on this, he activated more than 500 mortal goo at once, and even more supplementary goo worms as time passed. This killer move's difficulty as well as the time needed to activate it were far higher than sword marks targeting death. Thus, it could not be used extensively. Finally, Fong Yuan took out Wave Sword Immortal Goo. This immortal goo looked like either a blade or water at various times, it expanded in the air, soon resembling a blue circular wave of water, it surrounded the area all around it. Fong Yuan was about to attack the snow monsters, when at this time, a huge figure descended. Fong Yuan raised his head and drew in a deep breath. He saw that a giant ruin bat had formed and filled the sky, covering the surroundings. Oh no! Fong Yuan's heart jumped. This ruin bat was huge, it was an ancient desolate beast, able to fight rank 7 goo immortals. At the same time, ruin bats were space path beasts, they had incredible destructive force if they rampaged in the immortal aperture, they could even shatter the walls of the immortal aperture. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know, report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1056, Fong Yuan undergoes tribulation, 4 out of 5. Chapter 1056, Fong Yuan undergoes tribulation, 4 out of 5. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. It is only my first earthly calamity, but there are so many desolate beast snow monsters, and even an ancient ruin bat. Fong Yuan looked up with a bitter expression. The ancient ruin bat was huge, it cast a shadow that loomed over Fong Yuan and countless snow monsters. At once, the blizzard weakened. The snow monsters stopped making cries and roars, they looked up at this ferocious beast in the sky. Before leaving Langya Blessed Land, I had already used luck path killer moves to increase my luck. Since the tribulation, I have been using dog shit luck immortal goo continuously. My luck should have reduced the might of the earthly calamity already. Even so, this earthly calamity is still so incredibly powerful. Fong Yuan gritted his teeth, focusing his mind again. The ancient ruin bat flew in the sky, its body was huge like a mountain, crashing down on Fong Yuan. At once, aura was bursting out, the air was compressed as a strong pressure could be felt. Sword path killer move, triple layered sword wave. Fong Yuan had no way to retreat, he could only face it and use the 3rd sword path killer move. Rumble. A loud sound. The sword waves around him started moving around, they rumbled as ripples appeared. These waves were shining with a silvery white light, they were extremely sharp and had incredible offensive power. The waves moved upwards in defiance of gravity, splitting apart in the air, as multiple gigantic waves crashed at the ancient ruin bat. The ruin bat did not make a sound, it smashed these waves. Fang Yuan pushed with a hand, swoosh, another huge wave was summoned. This wave was larger than the first one, it filled the entire surroundings. There were many ripples at the edge of the wave, they were shining and emitting a dangerous aura. Wherever the sword waves went, everything was cleansed, the blizzard was wiped out and even air shattered. Evidently, this was an area of effect attack. It used the rank 7 wave sword Immortal Gu as the core, along with several water path Immortal Gu which were borrowed from Xianxia land spirit by Fang Yuan. The second sword wave crashed into the ruin bat. The ruin bat, which was flying down, stopped moving for a moment, at the same time, it screeched out in pain. The sword wave did not last long, after it receded, Fang Yuan could see that there were deep marks left by swords on the ancient ruin bat. In normal situations, ruin bats would avoid danger and would retreat when they encountered danger that threatened their lives. But this ancient ruin bat was not a normal specimen, it was formed from the earthly calamity. After getting injured, it did not rest, it charged at Fang Yuan relentlessly. The ruin bat was a space path beast, facing it, Fang Yuan's sword escape Immortal Gu had little effect. Because the space around Fang Yuan was affected by the ruin bat's strength. 1 or 2 steps would take several hundred steps to travel in reality. Simply dodging was a terrible idea. Even though the ruin bat flew slowly, its space path powers also restricted Fang Yuan's speed. The only way to resist was by eliminating the enemy, using offense against offense, that was the best plan. Thankfully, triple-layered sword wave could unleash 3 sword waves, its might grew with each wave. The third wave. The sword wave was 10 meters tall, it crashed towards the ancient ruin bat with immense might, the sound of the moving wave filled the world. The ripples were sharp with sword light, even Fang Yuan, who was the user, felt his body shuddering, a feeling of chilliness inside him. Boom! The sword wave and the ruin bat collided. The ancient ruin bat's charge halted, it raised its head and cried out in utter pain. The sword wave struck at its stomach, the wounds from earlier were hit again, its injuries were deepening. Finally, when the wave was about to run out of water, it pierced through the ancient ruin bat's back. Poof! With a loud sound, a large amount of flesh and blood fell from the ancient ruin bat's body. After being cut by the third sword wave, the ancient ruin bat slimmed down, its huge body became much smaller. The gigantic mountain which emitted an immense pressure had been lifted. Fang Yuan felt his entire body relaxing. The space path power that was restricting him earlier had vanished. The heavily injured ancient ruin bat crashed to the ground, after floating around like a kite with its strings cut. With a huge sound, snow and ice were sent flying on impact. I killed it. Fang Yuan was joyous, but his expression suddenly changed. A huge amount of true meaning entered his mind, like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. This true meaning far surpassed the total gains from earlier. In an instant, Fang Yuan's state of mind was scattered. Fang Yuan forgot himself, he was like a ruined bat, from birth to growing up, until his death. Flying in the sky, he tore through space, traveling freely in the huge world. After a momentary daze, Fang Yuan jolted to awareness, his eyes, which were unfocused, gave off a sharp light. It seems that too much true meaning would be like a snake swallowing an elephant, I would overeat and have a risk of dying from bursting my stomach. Realizing this, cold sweat dripped from Fang Yuan's forehead. Reckless Savage's true meaning was good, it was the fastest way to raise one's attainment level. But there was a limit to everything in the world. Too much of a good thing would lead to harm. With too much of Reckless Savage's true meaning, the Gu Immortal's consciousness would be destroyed. Thankfully, Fang Yuan had a Wisdom Path foundation and had defensive Wisdom Path Immortal Gu that he borrowed from Xianxia land spirit. Otherwise, Fang Yuan's consciousness would be destroyed by the true meaning. After losing his senses, he might think he was truly a ruined bat that had died in the earthly calamity. I have little immortal essence left, thankfully, the ancient ruin bat is already dead. Fang Yuan floated in the sky, looking down. After the ruin bat's corpse landed on the ground, it turned into snow, breaking apart. But there were 100 desolate beast snow monsters on the ground, along with an uncountable number of small snow monsters. 70 feet tall ancient desolate beast snow monsters were starting to appear. Damn it, it has only been such a short time. Seeing this, Fang Yuan felt terrible. He felt a strong sense of helplessness towards such a huge group of enemies. To clear up these snow monsters, I will need to borrow immortal essence stones from Xianxia land spirit. Fang Yuan was not willing to do it. He had already repaid the debt he owed to Xianxia land spirit, but now he had no choice but to borrow again. The blizzard which had weakened was getting stronger again. Palm-sized snowflakes flew down from the sky. Raging winds rampaged wildly. 2 ancient ruin bats started to form in the blizzard. Fang Yuan's body shook, his expression was ashen as he cursed internally, I might as well die, what sort of earthly calamity is this? Even heavenly tribulations are not this terrifying. This was of course, just a complaint to vent his emotions. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, he shot out like an arrow, taking the initiative to attack. The ancient ruin bat earlier had almost killed him already. If 2 appeared at the same time and attacked Fang Yuan, he could not win. The earthly calamity's power was starting to decline, it was going to end. These 2 ancient ruin bats formed slowly, it could not compare to earlier. Fang Yuan wanted to attack before these 2 ancient ruin bats finished forming. But at this time, a new blizzard started to fall from the sky. Several huge snowballs were directed towards him, they were like horse carriages. Thankfully, Fang Yuan had quasi-grandmaster flying attainment, he dodged in time and was not hit. Fang Yuan took a look, the perpetrators were the snow monsters on the ground. After the nurturing of the blizzard, the ancient snow monsters had increased in numbers, growing rapidly. Earlier there were only a few, now there were 28 of them. These ancient snow monsters clenched their fists as snowballs formed. After growling, they stretched their hands as the horse carriage-like snowballs shot up like meteors, towards Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan's heart sank to rock bottom. These 2 ancient ruin bats were hard to deal with, and with these snowballs obstructing his movement, his plan would be delayed. By the time these 2 ancient ruin bats formed, Fang Yuan would fail this tribulation for sure. Just as Fang Yuan was in a dangerous situation while undergoing tribulation in his immortal aperture, someone else was also undergoing tribulation in the icy plane. This was a Gu master's immortal ascension, the heaven and earth chi was turning into the tribulation. Master, save me! The Gu master cried out, facing the attack of the frost lightning. He could not retaliate, he could only watch as death descended. Bam! A soft sound echoed. At the crucial moment, a figure stood in front of the Gu master undergoing tribulation. The frost lightning that was unstoppable against the Gu master was fragile as paper in front of this person. The frost lightning appeared and disappeared just as quickly. It was useless, it could not even touch that person's clothing. Master's cultivation level is so high. The Gu master sighed. Ever since the tribulation started, he had been sighing and feeling shocked, he was almost numb now. This is only the flying frost jumping lightning tribulation, it is not even one of the 10 great catastrophes. Gu immortal Chu Du was expressionless, he felt regret looking at the lingering frost lightning. Master, from your words, you are not happy with the intensity of the tribulation? The Gu master asked. Chu Du answered plainly, when Gu masters ascend, they draw in heaven and earth chi. During this process, they would mingle with heaven's will. If they ask any questions regarding cultivation, heaven's will would give them an answer. This is also known as natural inspiration. But in the northern icy plane, when strength path Gu masters undergo immortal ascension, they would trigger reckless savage's true meaning. Because of this, the Gu master does not interact with heaven's will, instead, they will mingle with reckless savage's true meaning, and their strength path and transformation path attainment levels will rise sharply. The stronger the tribulation, the higher the quantity of reckless savage's true meaning gathered. I nurtured all of you disciples because I want the true meaning of reckless savage during your ascension. Obtaining the true meaning would allow my strength path attainment level to rise. So that's it. The Gu master realized, So this is what Master meant regarding the need for my help when you made me your disciple back then? Chu Du was about to speak when a huge sound from a great distance was heard. Chu Du looked, he saw that far away, space was cracked, like a broken mirror, the scene of Fang Yuan fighting with the ancient ruin bats in his immortal aperture could be seen. This? Chu Du's body shook, his eyes were shining immediately. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1057, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 5/5. Chapter 1057, Fang Yuan undergoes tribulation, 5/5. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Chu Du. Known as Domination Immortal, a legendary person in Northern Plains Gu immortal world. He was born in a poor family, he was not of the Huang Jin bloodline, he had a lowly start, even his aperture awakening was by chance. Without any teachers or tribesmen to help him, he cultivated alone. He cultivated strength path, but was not restrained by the flaws of it. With his overwhelming talent, he independently created Jin Strength Gu, Strength of 10 Jin Gu, Jun Strength Gu, Strength of 10 Jun Gu and others. Using these Gu worms, he grew step by step, under everyone's shocked gazes, he turned from a mortal to an immortal. But this was not the end of his legend. When he became a Gu immortal, he went back to his roots and created the human Jun Strength branch. This small branch gave the dying strength path a surge of rejuvenation, it was as if vitality had filled dying trees, strength path shined again in a different light. After the beast strength phantom branch and atmospheric heaven and earth branch, it was recognized by everyone that strength path had a new human Jun strength branch. With his efforts alone, he changed the future of strength path. Nobody could deny his grand achievement. Now, 9 out of 10 Northern Plains Gu masters cultivated strength path on the side, they mostly used the human Jun strength branch. Destiny was a mystical thing, nobody could decipher it. Be it Chu Du or Fang Yuan, they had never thought that they would meet in such a situation. Fang Yuan was undergoing tribulation, because of the ancient ruin bat's power, his immortal aperture's walls were shattered, connecting to the outside world. And Chu Du was assisting his disciple in his immortal ascension tribulation, absorbing the true meaning of reckless savage. The northern icy plain was so huge, but these two people chose their tribulation location so closely. Both of their eyes made contact over the distance in an instant. Chu Du had just destroyed his disciple's tribulation, one of his hands was behind his back, while the other was toying with the frost lightning, he was calm and composed. Fang Yuan was wearing a white robe, he had a sharp gaze, his body was injured, battle intent rose in him like he was a divine sword, the sharpness in him made even Chu Du frown. Someone is undergoing tribulation here, what is going on? The ancient ruin bat inside has reckless savage's true meaning, it manifested using the tribulation. This person has such an amazing method, he can replicate the immortal ascension and obtain reckless savage's true meaning to improve himself. Chu Du felt immense shock before it turned into joy. Domination Immortal Chu Du. Fang Yuan was shocked, this person is helping another person with his tribulation, he must be after reckless savage's true meaning. Oh no, he saw what is going on here, he will definitely seek me. Fang Yuan had obtained the killer move Immortal Tribulation Tempering Aperture from Land Spirit, this was a huge attraction to Domination Immortal Chu Du. As long as I can get his method, why would I need to bother with raising disciples for immortal ascension? I can undergo tribulations myself and draw in reckless savage's true meaning, the tribulations would be stronger and I would obtain even more true meaning, that would be best. I must get this method. Chu Du screamed in his mind, he shot towards Fang Yuan like a flash of lightning. He was known as the Domination Immortal, in the past when he was rank 6, an experienced lone immortal came to find trouble with him and was beaten to a pulp. The lone immortal called for reinforcements, but the 3 lone immortals were chased by the newly ascended Chu Du, he chased them for an enormous distance before killing all 3 immortals. 100 years later, Chu Du and a Gu immortal of Lu tribe had a conflict, after a dozen rounds of fighting, the Lu tribe Gu immortal lost and begged him for mercy, but Chu Du killed him without hesitation. Next, Lu tribe sent out several Gu immortals. Chu Du's 2 fists could not rival 4 palms, he was outnumbered, he went into seclusion for decades. When he appeared again, he had rank 7 cultivation level, he went around and destroyed 18 of Lu tribe's resource points in 3 days. 3 of Lu tribe's Gu immortals chased after him, but he did not run away. Instead, he forced the 3 Lu tribe Gu immortals to retreat and even nearly attacked their headquarters. Chu Du encircled Lu tribe's blessed land and refused to leave. Lu tribe's first supreme elder emerged outside in anger, fighting with Chu Du for a long time. He was an experienced rank 7 expert, but he could not do anything to Chu Du, he could only let him leave freely. After this battle, Chu Du's reputation surged, the entire Gu immortal world found out about his domineering style. No Gu immortal dared to look down on him. Those who tried to find trouble with him had to consider it thoroughly before acting. But after this battle, Chu Du became very low profile, he cultivated in seclusion and rarely showed himself. It was only during the recent Northern Plains auction that he appeared in front of everyone. Now, it seemed that in the past, Chu Du gained a huge growth in strength and defeated Lu tribe because of Reckless Savage's true meaning. He nurtured a few Gu masters and helped them to ascend to immortal, his strength path attainment level reached Grandmaster level, and he created his own immortal killer moves. When the time was ripe, he took advantage of Lu tribe's temporary weakness and challenged them. He not only took revenge for himself, he even created a fierce reputation. These last years, he had been secluded, staying inside the northern icy plain, trying to excavate the huge treasure known as Reckless Savage's true meaning. Chu Du saw Fang Yuan. He not only wanted Fang Yuan's method of drawing out Reckless Savage's true meaning, he even had a feeling of unhappiness because his treasure was being taken by others. Thus, he did not think too deeply, he attacked directly. He wanted to take down Fang Yuan and interrogate the method to lure out Reckless Savage's true meaning. Though the distance was great, it was nothing to Gu immortals. Their distance was shrinking rapidly. Ha! Chu Du stretched out his right hand, pointing at Fang Yuan who was in the immortal aperture, but a sword light shot at him first. He reacted quickly, but Fang Yuan was even faster. Almost at the first instant, Fang Yuan used sword marks targeting death and shot out Flying Sword Immortal Gu. Flying Sword pierced through the sky, shining in bright silvery light. Chu Du could not look at it directly. Chu Du chuckled, he stretched out his right arm, grabbing at Flying Sword. Boom! An explosion caused the air to burst. A huge strength path phantom in the form of Chu Du's right hand squeezed the air. It was like a rampaging mountain, moving quickly and grabbing Flying Sword Immortal Gu. Surprise flashed across Fang Yuan's eyes. Chu Du's strength path phantom hand was very similar to his giant hand. But evidently, his strength path giant hand was not only stronger than Fang Yuan's, it was even more agile. Chu Du's strength path giant hand moved together with his actual right hand. After grabbing Flying Sword Immortal Gu, Chu Du clenched his fist and directly sealed Flying Sword Immortal Gu. Fang Yuan instantly felt that his connection to Flying Sword Immortal Gu weakened severely. Chu Du frowned in an unnoticeable manner. He opened his clenched fist. He saw a trace of blood at the center of his palm. It was the killer move sword marks targeting death's effect. Interesting. He commented lightly. While he said that, the injury on his palm has already healed. Hand over the method and I will spare your life. Chu Du proclaimed, but when he raised his head, his expression changed. At the crucial moment, Fang Yuan chopped off the lower half of his body. He used a certain blood path killer move and refined his lower body into a pool of blood. The blood fused into the immortal aperture's gap and fixed the crack within space in an instant. Chu Du quickly used his strength path giant hand to attack. But it was a moment too late, he had lost his chance. The giant hand failed to hit anything. Like a crashing meteor, it landed on the ground and formed a huge crater of over dozens of meters wide. Chu Du flew to the spot where Fang Yuan placed his immortal aperture with a heavy expression. He did not have any method to break into the immortal aperture. Damn it! Why did I encounter Domination Immortal of all people? Inside the immortal aperture, Fang Yuan only was left with his upper body. He floated in the air. His injuries were severe, his lower body had already been refined and used. Intense pain did not affect Fang Yuan due to the use of gu worms. Faced with two ancient ruin bats, he kept his composure and calmness. I have to kill these two ruin bats as soon as possible. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, his expression was ruthless. Triple-layered sword wave. He used this killer move consecutively, the waves crashed against the ancient ruin bats. Ugh! Fang Yuan's 7 orifices spurted blood, his head was dizzy, he was on the verge of fainting. His head was hurting. Triple-layered sword wave was a killer move that used many gu worms, it was not easy to activate. In order to use so many gu worms, he had used up all of the thoughts in his mind, his brain was in a state of overuse. And to protect his aperture walls, to prevent the ancient ruin bats from causing more destruction, Fang Yuan had to block all of the ancient ruin bats' attacks desperately. Seconds passed like years. Every time he blocked an ancient ruin bat's attack, Fang Yuan's vision turned dark, he was uncertain about his capability regarding blocking the next attack. He could not think of anything else, all of his newly produced thoughts were used to mobilize all of the gu worms in his body. Both sides were like warriors in a death match, they attacked with sharp weapons and stabbed their opponents continuously, whoever was unable to endure it would fall in defeat first. After an unknown period of time, a gust of wind blew, clarity flashed in Fang Yuan's dazed eyes. Did I succeed? He looked up in the sky, at the falling ancient ruin bat as he muttered to himself. Soon, the thoughts in his mind replenished amply, he could finally think again. He finally killed one ancient ruin bat, there was still another left. Fang Yuan licked his dry lips, his face was pale as paper, but it showed a distorted expression as he charged towards the ancient ruin bat again. It was much easier for him this time. Facing an ancient ruin bat alone, Fang Yuan felt much less pressure, the thoughts in his mind increased in number, he could think of more things, he could attack the ruin bat after making rational decisions in response. But he did not dare to relax. If another ancient ruin bat formed, it would be troublesome. Even worse was if Domination Immortal Chu Du was allowed to come in, if that happened, Fang Yuan's situation would be far worse, it might be even more terrifying than dying in the calamity. But eventually, the heaven and earth qi calmed, and Fang Yuan succeeded in killing the third ancient ruin bat, no more ruin bats formed, and Chu Du was absent. The calamity has ended. I finally survived this. Fang Yuan looked down weakly, this place had already turned into an icy field, countless desolate beast snow monsters were staring at him, growling as they showed ruthless expressions. Thankfully, my immortal aperture is big enough, there are no resources in here yet, I will let these snow monsters stay for now. They cannot break the aperture walls. Fang Yuan flew up to the first layer of the heavens in the sky of his immortal aperture. He was severely injured, he needed to recuperate. While healing his injuries, he also needed to prepare for battle. If Chu Du invaded this place, it would no laughing matter. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know, report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1058, Blood Asset Immortal Gu. Chapter 1058, Blood Asset Immortal Gu. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. 3 days later, inside the Sovereign Immortal Aperture. The Sovereign Immortal Aperture was extremely huge, its layout was like the 5 regions and 9 heavens. After Fang Yuan succeeded in passing the tribulation, he had been staying inside the first layer of the 9 heavens to heal. At this moment, he was at a crucial moment of healing his injuries. Fang Yuan was submerged hundreds of feet under a lake of blood which filled a wide surrounding range. He was gravely injured, it was a sad sight. His entire lower body was cut away, only his upper body was in the lake of blood. The lake of blood was full of life force, it entered his huge injury continuously. After 3 days, a blood-colored silhouette could be vaguely seen in the form of his legs and lower body. Suddenly, Fang Yuan opened his eyes. His eyes were blood red, the moment he opened them, it was as if lightning shined deeply inside the dark lake of blood. Blood path body refinement, restore my immortal body. Fang Yuan cried out in his mind, countless thoughts were colliding. Tens of thousands of mortal Gu were mobilized with thoughts, they shined with dazzling light. These mortal Gu were placed in various parts of the blood lake. Once connected, the entire dark lake of blood shined in a bright red light. Gradually, the lights from these mortal Gu fused into one. A rank 6 immortal Gu emerged from Fang Yuan's body, floating upwards. This Gu resembled a round pearl, it was as large as a goose egg, the pearl had countless markings on it that were moving around, like the blooming of a field of lotuses, or the rumbling of clouds. Blood Path Immortal Gu, Blood Asset. This immortal Gu was not one known to Fang Yuan, this was a Gu innovated by the previous Xianxia land spirit, he had created this using Blood Path Gu recipes he bought in Treasure Yellow Heaven. Blood Asset Immortal Gu's effect was to protect a portion of the immortal materials or Gu worms during refinement. If the refinement failed, some of these immortal materials or Gu worms could be restored afterwards using Blood Asset Immortal Gu. Ever since he obtained this immortal Gu, the previous Xianxia land spirit had saved a huge amount of resources. The previous land spirit treasured this immortal Gu deeply, he would not exchange it no matter what. But after changing personalities, the new Xianxia land spirit most wanted to promote the rise of hairy men, he did not have much interest in Gu refinement. When transacting with Fang Yuan, Blood Asset Immortal Gu fell into Fang Yuan's demonic clutches. Fang Yuan obtained it and did not outwardly express any emotions, but he was overjoyed internally. This Gu could only be used in refinement path in the hands of ordinary Gu immortals. But Fang Yuan was a blood path grandmaster, not only could he display its full ability, he could also use it in a variety of ways that surpassed its original limits. Novel full. Like now. Blood Asset Immortal Gu caused the entire lake of blood to boil, like a volcano that was ready to erupt with molten magma underneath. Gu gu gu. Large numbers of bubbles floated to the surface of the lake. Streams of life force gushed into Blood Asset Immortal Gu like sparrows returning to their nests. Blood Asset Immortal Gu floated above Fang Yuan's head, it rapidly rotated, like an inexhaustible black hole, it drew away all of the vitality in the lake of blood. Next, after purification, a stream of life force that could be seen with the naked eye, resembling translucent flowing water, poured into Fang Yuan's body. Crack crack. Fang Yuan's bones were cracking, it was a delightful sound. His withered flesh became enriched, inflating like a ball. The injuries on his skin vanished instantly. His long black hair grew out, covered in a layer of gloss. Most important was the huge injury on Fang Yuan's body. The translucent blood-colored silhouette of his lower body started to gain physical form under the injection of vitality. In the blink of an eye, Fang Yuan's heavy injuries healed, his flesh recovered and he was whole again. Whoosh! Fang Yuan shot out of the lake of blood like an arrow, appearing in the air. His consciousness swept around the area as he nodded in satisfaction, this body created by sovereign immortal fetus Gu is truly profound and mystical. I have Dao marks of every path, yet they don't interfere with each other. Because of this, I can use healing methods of any path and display their full effect. If not, how could I recover from this terrible injury in only 3 days? Fang Yuan stretched out his arm, Blood Asset Immortal Gu shot out of the lake of blood like a meteor, into Fang Yuan's hands. Holding this immortal Gu in front of him, Fang Yuan took a look of appreciation before placing it on his chest. Blood Asset Immortal Gu lived on Fang Yuan's body, at his chest area, turning into a red pearl tattoo. This type of storage was not safe. If Fang Yuan's body was destroyed, Blood Asset Immortal Gu would also face destruction. Immortal Gu were extremely fragile, even toddlers could kill rank 9 Immortal Gu. It was safest to keep it in the immortal aperture. But now, Fang Yuan's sovereign immortal aperture was still in the outside world, he could only do this, but as long as he was careful, there would be no issue. In the 500 years of my previous life, I could not obtain a single blood path immortal Gu even after a long search, I had no choice but to refine Spring-Autumn Cicada. If I had this blood path immortal Gu back then, I would have already achieved much more in life, even if the 10 great ancient sects encircled me, I would be able to fight them confidently. Fang Yuan was not simply bragging. In his previous life, he had battle strength at the peak of rank 6, he had fought against 2 ordinary rank 7 Gu immortals and won. Even though there were many reasons for the outcomes, like the terrain and other coincidences, defeating a rank 7 as a rank 6 was truly an incredible feat. Of course, compared to Bo Qing and Feng Jiugu, this was a very ordinary achievement. But the important thing was, Fang Yuan defeated the rank 7 Gu immortals without any immortal Gu himself. He used Blood Path Mortal Gu and Mortal Killer moves to defeat such strong foes. During that time, Fang Yuan became an immortal using Blood Path. He not only created his own Blood Path Mortal Gu, he even designed many Blood Path Killer moves. They were either high in power, had mysterious effects, or were very bloodthirsty abilities. Fang Yuan's Blood Path attainment level was Grandmaster. He did not lack anything but a Blood Path Immortal Gu. If he had it, he could quickly modify his Mortal Killer moves into countless Immortal Killer moves. His battle strength would surge immensely. In his previous life, or even after rebirth, Fang Yuan did not obtain a single Blood Path Immortal Gu. After rebirth, he advanced rapidly, taking huge risks and facing great challenges. Because of all sorts of reasons, he did not obtain a single Blood Path Immortal Gu. Author's note: actually, it was the influence of Heaven's will. Until recently, he finally obtained Blood Asset Immortal Gu from trading with Xianxia Land Spirit. Actually, Fang Yuan did not want to start his Blood Path cultivation so early. Any Blood Path Gu immortal would be detected by Heavenly Court and be listed on the Demon Judgment Board. Blood Path was very harmful, even demonic cultivators did not like them, everyone wanted to exterminate them. Novel full. When Fang Yuan obtained Blood Asset Immortal Gu, he thought, the less I use it, the better. But situations were unpredictable. During the tribulation, he encountered Domination Immortal Chu Du. His life was at stake. He had to use Blood Asset Immortal Gu to create the Immortal Killer move to seal the gap in the aperture wall. When healing himself, Fang Yuan also used a Blood Path Killer move. Only this healing technique could heal his injuries rapidly, and allow him to defend against the huge threat of Chu Du. Fang Yuan did not want to ask for more help from Xianxia Land Spirit. The more he exposed, the higher the chances of leaking information. Fang Yuan had reserved some information from Xianxia Land Spirit. He concealed the biggest secret of Sovereign Immortal Aperture. Fang Yuan was a Blood Path Grandmaster. With his 500 years of deep accumulation, it was easy to modify Blood Path Mortal Killer moves into Immortal Killer moves. It was a natural process. It was unlike He Lu Lan in the past, who faced so much difficulty in elevating Self-Strength Phantom to immortal level. In fact, he had created many Blood Path Immortal Gu recipes in his previous life. But because his Refinement Path and Wisdom Path attainment levels were too low, he could not continue on those deductions. They were very incomplete. After retrieving Blood Asset Immortal Gu, Fang Yuan thought to himself, 3 days have passed, Chu Du did not attack, it seems he has no methods to break into the immortal aperture. 3 days ago, Fang Yuan paid a huge price of getting heavily injured to seal the aperture wall's gap, causing Chu Du's plan to fail. If Chu Du had any methods, he would have used them already. But 3 days had passed. Even if some methods needed time for preparation, they would not take 3 days, thus, Fang Yuan surmised that Chu Du had no options. This was not strange. After an immortal aperture is placed in the 5 regions, as long as the entrance was not open, they would shrink into a tiny spot and be undetectable. Outsiders could not break in. Back then, when Immortal Crane Sect attacked to Immortal Blessed Land, they had to use Fang Zheng's bloodline as a connection to use blood path methods in sensing where the Blessed Land was. Chu Du was a Strength Path Gu immortal, while methods to pierce into immortal apertures involve Space Path. Fang Yuan guessed correctly, but he did not relax as a result. Even though Chu Du could not break into the Sovereign Immortal Aperture, he could stay behind and guard this area. This was an expected situation. Thinking from his perspective, as the Strength Path Gu immortal Chu Du who wanted to obtain Reckless Savage's true meaning desperately, would he ever give up such a huge opportunity? In the past, when facing Lu tribe, a super force, Chu Du did not leave and stayed outside their headquarters, until Lu tribe's first supreme elder fought with him. Fang Yuan was alone. How could he compare to Lu tribe? Even if he added in Xianxia Blessed Land, it could not match Lu tribe. Those hairy man Gu immortals had negligible battle strength. Furthermore, even if Chu Du could not break the aperture walls, he could find others to help. It seems that I am trapped here for now. If I collect my immortal aperture and use sword escape, can I escape from Chu Du's pursuit? Fang Yuan shook his head. Sword escape immortal Gu might be fast, but it flies in a straight line. I would need to stop if I want to change directions. This is a major flaw. Against ordinary Gu immortals, it would work, but against domination immortal, it is not enough. I need at least an immortal killer move. While thinking, Fang Yuan flew below the first layer of the heavens. When he got to the part of the sky where he was undergoing tribulation, the snow monsters sensed Fang Yuan and growled at him. Ancient snow monsters even raised their hands, throwing huge snowballs at him. After sighing, Fang Yuan had no choice but to leave. The earthly calamity is over, but these snow monsters are still around. I have to ignore them for now. In any case, this immortal aperture has nothing for them to destroy. I have sword escape immortal Gu, but my sword path attainment level is too low. There is more hope in blood path methods. Next, I should modify mortal killer moves and create a blood path immortal killer move, using blood asset immortal Gu as the core, for use in movement. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1059, Dog Shit Splits Luck. Chapter 1059, Dog Shit Splits Luck. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Western Desert, on a certain trail. Kill these bastards, the money is all ours. Let's rob them. Guards, defend us. If these goods are lost, the clan will not let us off. Sounds of fighting could be heard. Around a sandy dune, a group of bandits and caravan members were fighting in an intense battle. This bandit group had been committing crimes in the desert for a long time. They were all human Gu masters. They were fierce and experienced in battle. They were quite strong. In the merchant caravan, there were few humans. They were mostly feathermen. A portion of this group of featherman Gu masters were standing on the ground guarding the goods, while some were flying in the sky, fighting the bandits. Waves of fiery attacks were unleashed. The temperature was rising. At times, wind blades were shot out, cutting the trail or directly into people, causing bloodshed. Western Desert was flourishing with fire path and wind path Gu worms. Gu masters of these two paths were most common. After a moment, the bandits had the upper hand. They suffered little loss. But the merchant caravan was already heavy with casualties. Han Li was lying in a pile of goods. His body was covered in blood, his face was charred. He had been hit by a wind blade earlier during the intense battle. There was a deep and long injury on his chest. It was still bleeding. His face was charred because a fire pellet had exploded around him. The hot debris had slammed into his face. Damn it! Am I going to die here today? The battle scene had Han Li feel despair. He had started his cultivation journey after much difficulties, becoming a Gu master by chance. But he was chased out and could only be a vagrant. To survive, he joined this caravan as a member, but to think that such a merchant caravan would still be targeted by bandits. Run! This merchant caravan is finished. I am not going to die with them. Smart people will run with me. These feathermen are finished. Even if they return alive, they will be executed by the clan. The loss was assured. The merchant caravan members started to escape for themselves. They were all human Gu masters employed to be guards. These fellows. Ignore them, conserve our primeval essence. Even if we die, we will die fighting. The featherman Gu masters gritted their teeth, saying angrily. How can this be? Han Li was dazed. He was very young and inexperienced. He could not react to the fact that these human Gu masters were escaping. Why are you not running? A featherman Gu master walked over and saw Han Li. Han Li gasped. He did not know what to do. He knew who this featherman Gu master was. He was the leader of the caravan. Even though your cultivation level is low, in some ways, you are far superior to those escaping humans. The Featherman leader sighed, before patting Han Li's shoulder. His hand flashed with light, he patted Han Li's shoulder 3 times, his injuries healed at once. Amazing! This is the might of a rank 4 Gu master. Han Li was shocked, he wanted to express his gratitude, but the Featherman leader had already charged into the battlefield. The front lines were in a critical state already, the Featherman leader had to join the fight. Once the rank 4 Gu master attacked, the bandits suffered huge losses, many fell off their horses. Among the bandit group, there were rank 4 experts too, but they were sitting at the back, watching coldly with icy smiles on their faces. The Featherman leader quickly controlled the battlefield, he killed many enemies. Han Li watched with much enthusiasm, while the other Feathermen praised loudly. But the Featherman leader's state of mind was turning grim. He knew that the enemy was ruthless, they were using cannon fodder to waste his primeval essence. When the true bandit experts appear, he would have less primeval essence, he would be at a disadvantage. Whoosh! At this time, wind could be heard from afar. The wind was huge and grand, like the howling of a desolate beast. Everyone looked over, as someone shouted, "Oh no! It is a golden thread tornado." The tornadoes in Western Desert were split into golden thread, silver thread, bronze thread, and so on, in decreasing order of strength. Golden thread tornadoes were the strongest, even a rank 4 Gu master would perish if they got trapped in them. The Feathermen panicked, the bandits also panicked, like gunpowder that had been ignited, they shouted loudly as they charged towards the caravan. They wanted to take down the merchant caravan before the golden thread tornado appeared, to take the precious goods and leave. "Hold on!" the Featherman leader shouted. Even though the tornado was dangerous, and Featherman Gu masters would still likely die in it, they were able to naturally fly, they would be in a much better situation than the humans. This intense battle reached the climax. Every moment, people lost their lives. Han Li was hiding in between the goods as he defended them. He had low cultivation level, he was not a significant target, the bandits did not think of him as a threat. Han Li was indeed not a threat, when his primeval essence was expended, he was no different from a powerless mortal. Few of the fire pellets and wind blades hit Han Li, because he was near the goods, and both parties did not want to ruin the goods. The tornado moved quickly, it was still far away earlier, but now, it was already close to the battlefield. Winds howled, sand flew in the air, when hitting against Han Li's body, he felt numb and pain. Retreat! Even though he was unwilling, the astute bandit leader called out, choosing to retreat. The bandits moved like the wind, even though they were injured and had blood-red eyes, they left quickly. Quickly! Move these goods away. The Featherman leader had severe injuries, but he still placed his focus on the goods first. The Feathermen quickly saved the goods, nobody cared about Han Li. The tornado assaulted, Han Li could not save himself, he was sucked into it. Many Feathermen and large amounts of goods followed after him. Han Li was swept into the tornado, his vision was spinning, he could not tell which direction he was facing. He was like a flower, flying along with the raging winds, he was in danger of dying. Bam, he did not know whether he had hit a rock or some goods, but he fainted at once. After a long time, he slowly woke up. "Young man, you are finally awake." An old man was sitting beside him, speaking faintly. Who are you?" Han Li was still in a daze, he looked around and realized that he was lying on sand, there were rocks, corpses, and goods scattered around him. The tornado stopped. "I survived." Han Li was stunned before bursting out in joy. "If I did not save you, how could you survive?" The old man smiled. "Thank you, senior, for saving my life." Han Li quickly paid respects, sincerely expressing his gratitude. The old man nodded in appreciation. "Back in the day, before becoming an immortal, I was just like you. Today, the tornado that you got swept into was caused by me. I lost my bet with Tianjin after all. Before dying, I will impart the true inheritance of my entire life to you." Central Continent. Inside Broken Sword Valley. Where is Sword Chi Gu? Chase. This sword Chi Gu is mine, don't think of snatching it away. A group of Gu masters were shouting, they formed into a stream of people as they charged into the valley. "Lad, don't block us. Anyone who gets in our way will die." Hong Yi was outside of Broken Sword Valley when he saw a group of frenzied Gu masters charging towards him. Among them were rank 3 and 4 experts. Hong Yi's expression paled, he quickly escaped as he moved out of their way. A group of Gu masters whipped a dust storm, running past Hong Yi's body rapidly. What is going on?" Hong Yi muttered, his heart was still pounding. Listening to a conversation among some people passing by explained the situation to him. "I heard there is a rank 4 sword Chi Gu. No wonder so many people are going after it. Let's go quickly, we might be able to encounter a rank 4 sword Chi Gu." Wishful thinking. How long has it been since this Broken Sword Valley was created? There might be only one rank 4 sword Chi Gu. Don't even think about it. Sword Chi Gu, rank 4. Hong Yi's heart shook, a look of envy appeared on his face. He quickly ran into the valley. He had explored this valley before, but earlier, it was not like this. As it turned out, before the Battle of Tian Mountain, when immortal zombie Bo Qing awakened, he had shot out countless sword lights from under falling heavenly river. One sword light landed here, cutting this mountain into two, creating the shape of this valley. This was the origin of Broken Sword Valley. Initially, people did not pay attention to it, but soon, Central Continent Gu masters realized that this valley was producing wild sword path Gu worms. As it turned out, the sword light was not ordinary. Every sword light contained sword path Dao marks. After the sword light landed here, sword path Dao marks were carved into the valley. A special location was created, and many wild sword path Gu worms were slowly produced here. This fact could not be concealed, more and more Gu masters came here to find treasures. Earlier, a rank 4 sword Chi Gu was found by someone, creating a huge commotion for everyone. Rank 4 wild Gu worms are extremely rare. Even if I encounter one, I would not be able to catch it, it is too dangerous. Hong Yi thought as he carefully explored this valley. He moved away from the crowd. In an ordinary-looking location, he saw something shocking. It was a common caterpillar molting. But the thing was, the caterpillar's skin was shining. Hong Yi was stunned before recognizing this scene. He was overjoyed. Such luck. I actually came during the moment when the insect becomes a Gu. This aura it is emitting is so strong. Is it rank 4 or rank 5? Hong Yi could not wait for the caterpillar to finish molting. He quickly grabbed it in his hands. He immediately moved away to a safer location, activating his primeval essence and refining it. A moment later, he succeeded in refining it. He obtained a very strange rank 5 sword path Gu worm. It was black and palm-sized. It looked like a miniature sword sheath of iron. Rank 5 sword sheath Gu. What's the use of this Gu? Even though I obtained a rank 5 Gu, my primeval essence can't activate it. Hong Yi sighed to himself, when suddenly, he saw a sword path Gu worm coming out of a bush near him. It flew slowly towards him and entered the sword sheath Gu in his hand. Hong Yi was shocked. At once he was speechless. Southern border, on a nameless small mountain. It was night time, a huge rainstorm was pouring down. Xianxia, your life ends here today. A muscular man walked towards the peak with his arms behind his back. There were 3 Gu masters defending themselves. 1 male, 2 females. One female Gu master was heavily injured. She was Xianxia's servant, Xiao Lan. The other female Gu master had long, silky black hair flowing like a waterfall. Her skin was white like snow. She was extremely beautiful. It was Xianxia. Seeing the person approaching, Xianxia smiled bitterly. Xiangbaishi, to think that it was really you. Why do you need to fight to the death with me? Xiangbaishi laughed loudly. Father died, elder brother died, Chao Feng also died. As long as I kill you, 8th brother will ascend to the position of Shang clan leader. Thus, you must die today. Xianxia heard these words and her body shook. She almost fell to the ground, as if an invisible force had pushed her. She said in a mournful tone, for the position of clan leader, Shang Pu Lao is truly so cold-hearted and cruel. Xiangbaishi smiled coldly, yes, you saved 8th brother's life before, but so what? You want him to repay you with kindness and hand over the position of clan leader? Humph, Shang clan leader has authority over the entire city. You have undue benevolence, how can you compete with 8th brother? Xianxia shook her head. When I saved him, I did not think of fighting for the position of clan leader. Exactly, that is why you are in this state right now. Ha ha ha. Shang Baishi continued. Lady Xianci, what's the need to talk to this scumbag? Yi Fan was frowning, his tone expressed his utter hatred and disgust towards Shang Baishi. Young Master Yi, you should leave. He only wants my life, I will give it to him. You are not involved in this, don't interfere, quickly leave. Shang Xinci pushed Yi Fan's back, urging him to leave. I will not go. Yi Fan shouted, Lady Xinci, you were the one who saved me, a droplet received in need will be repaid with a whole spring, how can I abandon you? Humph, how touching. But you won't be able to leave even if you want to. Today, all 3 of you will die. Shang Xinci, you are still so naive. If I do not kill all of you, wouldn't the survivors tarnish 8th brother's reputation in the future? Shang Baishi said as he got closer. Yi Fan gritted his teeth, even though he was heavily injured and could not stand straight, he stood in front of Shang Xinci. A brave man. Shang Baishi commented, before pushing as Yi Fan fell to the ground. If you were in your peak condition, I would have to be wary of you. But your primeval essence has been used up, you are no threat. Ha ha ha. Shang Baishi laughed as he approached Shang Xinci. Shang Xinci shut her eyes, giving up any futile resistance. Before dying, in the depths of her heart, the figure of a man appeared. One thought emerged in her mind, if I could see him one last time before dying, how good would that be? But even after waiting for a while, she did not feel Shang Baishi's attack. Shang Xinci opened her eyes in confusion, she only saw that Shang Baishi was some steps in front of her, not moving at all. He was stiff as a statue, an expression of fear was frozen on his face. Humph, for simply some authority and wealth, you disregarded kinship, you are truly a disgrace to Shang clan. A female immortal appeared. You are. Shang Xinci was shocked. The female immortal looked at Shang Xinci with approval, saying warmly, don't be afraid, I am an ancestor of Shang clan, Shang Qing. I have decided, from now onwards, you will assume the role of Shang clan leader. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know, report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1060, Pot River, Luck Inspection. Chapter 1060, Pot River, Luck Inspection. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Pot River resembled a long jade belt, it was situated in the eastern area of central continent. The water in Pot River was smooth flowing, like a beautiful song, it was graceful and harmonious. Xie stood on the bank of Pot River as he waited for Feng Chanzi. Meanwhile, He Lulan, Shi Nu, and Tai Bai Yunsheng were hiding nearby, protecting Xie's safety. The river water flowed slowly, 2 dragonflies were flying above the river, landing on the pot grass nearby at times. There was a lot of pot grass growing in Pot River. This type of grass was deeply rooted in the soil below the river, drawing in nutrients. They were long and thin, the tip of the grass emerged above the river surface. The tip of one of the stalks of pot grass had a brown fruit. This fruit was still fist-sized, it was not mature now. The fruit was empty inside, and was not tightly closed, the tip was opened widely. At this moment, a dragonfly followed the smell of the fruit and entered the fruit rashly. It struggled for a moment, but it was captivated by the intense aroma, it did not fly out again. Xie watched silently. He knew, in a few months, more fruits would grow, the fruits would get larger, they would attract more insects, and even fish and prawns. As they grow, the fruit would close up eventually, and when they fully mature, the tips of the pot grass would look like brown pots, tightly sealed. And next, Pot River's annual flood season would come. During the flood season, Pot River would no longer be calm, water would move rapidly, sweeping all of the pot grass away. All these brown fruits would travel in the river, leaving their origins and floating away. On the two sides of the river, Gu masters would start to haul up all of these fruits. After smashing them, they could obtain the fish and insects inside, as well as some seeds of the pot grass. There was also a chance of getting Gu worms from them. These Gu worms were sleeping in the pot grass, they could be easily refined. A superforce of the 10 great ancient sects, Wind Cloud Manor, was in charge in Pot River. During this time every year, they would hold a festival around Pot River. Countless Gu masters would be drawn here, of all ages and genders, not just Wind Cloud Manor's disciples, but even all the surrounding forces would join in the festive season. As Xianxia looked at the pot grass in the river, his gaze began drifting elsewhere. In order to get the light of the immemorial era, he had already stayed in Pot River for some time. On the surface, he was calm and peaceful, but a lot of frustration was building up inside him, and this feeling was getting stronger as time continued to pass. I have spring-autumn cicada, but it is sealed now and is unusable. Before I refine it again, I will be watched by Heaven's will. Not only can Heaven's will influence my emotions stealthily, it can even plot and influence others to attack me. I cannot give Heaven's will any time to prepare, I cannot stay at the same spot for a long time. If Feng Chanzi does not show up again, I have to give up on this. Xianxia made up his mind. At this time, a green figure flew rapidly along the surface of Pot River, towards Xianxia. It is that rank 6 level grass puppet avatar. Be alert, stay wary of any unexpected surprises. Shadow Sex Immortals transmitted, focusing their minds. The grass puppet avatar saw Xianxia and said arrogantly, "The light of the immemorial era is with me, but Master said that the earlier price will not do, you have to pay an extra 30% on that basis." What? Another 30%? This is extortion, this Feng Chanzi really dares to raise it. The price was already very high, with another 30%, it is exorbitant. Shi and Tai Bai Yunxing discussed. Xianxia was also furious, but there was no choice, he needed the light of the immemorial era. To refine fixed immortal travel, the light of the immemorial era was needed, there were no alternatives. After staying silent for a while, Xianxia nodded, "I'll agree to it." The grass puppet avatar snorted, "Then let's trade." Xianxia was already prepared amply, both sides transacted quickly. The grass puppet avatar counted the amount before showing a satisfied expression. Xianxia suffered a huge loss, he paid a great price but he had finally obtained the light of the immemorial era, he was overall still pleased with it. He smiled at the grass puppet avatar, "It has been a pleasant transaction, we should trade again some other time." The grass puppet avatar said, "Humph, again? That depends on my master's mood. Actually, earlier, Master did not want to trade, but he had lost a bet to Lang Ziqiu some time ago, he wants to recoup his losses, so I came. You must remember this, my master definitely did not give the light of the immemorial era to you." Novel full. I understand. Actually, your manor has a huge inventory, it is truly a sea of treasure. Just a bit of the light of the immemorial era, what could it affect? Nobody would notice for sure. Xianxia said politely. Enough, this matter is over, quickly leave now, we cannot stay here for long. The grass puppet avatar said before leaving. Even without its reminder, Xianxia was already ready to leave. Concealing their traces, after flying for 100,000 li, Shadow Sex Group landed in a nameless forest, resting and recovering. Just now, even though we obtained the light of the immemorial era, Feng Chanzi's price was too high, we paid too much. To refine fixed immortal travel, we still need other supplementary immortal materials. Shi said. Thankfully, the light of the immemorial era is already obtained, the following matters are easier to solve. We can make use of Defy. Tai Bai Yunxing suggested. The important thing is, how many refinements can you do with this portion of the light of the immemorial era? He Lulan got to the point immediately. When Gu immortals refine immortal Gu, just one batch of immortal materials was not enough. Disregarding the hairy man heaven and earth style, and just looking at the human isolation style, the chances of refining a rank 6 immortal Gu were often less than 1%. Theoretically, Xianxia and others should have prepared 100 portions of materials. But after experimentation, reality was even more cruel. Because the success rate was not just dependent on the amount of immortal materials. Many times, even with more than 100 portions of immortal materials, one can still fail the refinement. This portion of light of the immemorial era can last for 9 refinement attempts. Xianxia said as he paused. He secretly activated an immortal Gu in his body. Rank 6 Luck Inspection Immortal Gu. This immortal Gu originally belonged to Qin Bai Sheng, coincidentally, because he needed it, Xianxia obtained it and used it temporarily. After the Battle of Tian Mountain, Shadow Sect failed, and this Luck Inspection Immortal Gu was transferred to Xianxia. This was an investigative Gu worm that could inspect the luck of people. Xianxia's eyes shone as he looked above him. His vision was very different now. A luck pillar, resembling an illusion, appeared in Xianxia's eyes. Xianxia was taken aback. Why did my luck improve so much out of nowhere? He had already inspected his own luck long ago, it was very bad. And because of spring-autumn cicada's drawback, his luck was continuing to decrease. But now, it was much better than his initial assessment. Don't tell me. A thought flashed in Xianxia's mind. He thought of Feng Yuan. He also thought of the self-luck true inheritance in Langya Land Spirit's hands. Earlier, Shadow Sect invaded Langya Land Spirit and took a portion of Refinement Cauldron, we even destroyed Dog Shit Luck Immortal Gu accidentally. Langya Land Spirit was preparing to refine it once again, and it just so happens that he succeeded recently. Perhaps he has already lent Dog Shit Luck to Feng Yuan. Xianxia felt that this was the most likely possibility. A few days ago, he was informed that Feng Yuan had passed his tribulation. Because Shadow Sect still had one hairy man Gu immortal traitor left inside Langya Blessed Land. That must be it. Originally, Feng Yuan connected his luck to several people, splitting it equally. After the Battle of Tian Mountain, my body is Feng Yuan's, while he still has his soul, both involve the connected luck. When he uses Dog Shit Luck Immortal Gu to improve his own luck, it will flow down like water, going towards Yifan, Hanli, Hongyi, and He Lulan. And these 4 people have luck connected to my body, thus, I also benefited from it. No wonder I waited so long earlier with no results and slim hopes. But now, Feng Chanzi suddenly lost a bet to Lang Ziqiu and needs capital, thus he transacted with me and I obtained the light of the immemorial era. After thinking about it, Xianxia found out about Feng Yuan's immense value. Novel full. His immortal aperture has to undergo tribulation every 2 months, he must have used Dog Shit Luck to increase his luck and decrease the might of the earthly calamity. This way, I can benefit from it. I do not need to go to Northern Plains and find Longevity Heaven to borrow luck. Even though he knows that this would strengthen his enemies, he has no choice. Because the calamities and tribulations of the sovereign immortal aperture far exceed logic, he has to do everything he can to survive every crisis. However, he chose to undergo tribulation in the northern icy plain, it was truly a wise move. Heaven's will is targeting him, trying to get rid of him, it would definitely strengthen the earthly calamity. But undergoing tribulation in the northern icy plain, reckless savage's true meaning replaced a portion of Heaven's will, it greatly reduced the danger. Humph, I hope you can survive this, I will reclaim your body one day. After staying in the nameless forest for a while, Xianxia and the others moved off on their journey again. Xianxia was moving quickly. He was pressed for time. Not only because his main body's remnant soul was stuck in the dream realm, facing great danger all the time, he had to make use of this good luck to refine fixed immortal travel, because the chances of success would be much higher. Northern Plains, Northern Icy Plain. Master, how long must we stay here? The newly advanced strength path rank 6 Gu immortal asked meekly. Du stood on the icy plain. He looked at the handprint that he had created on the ground, sighing. He did not answer his disciple. He fell into deep regret. I was too rash earlier. Why did I attack him without thinking? Since he knows the method to draw out reckless savages' true meaning, it will not be easy for me to get this method, regardless of whether it is an immortal killer move or an immortal Gu house. Even if I kill him, I need to prevent his soul from self-detonating, otherwise, it will all be for nothing. I would lose this immense opportunity to gain strength. I needed to act more carefully. At least, I should have been polite before resorting to brute force. Right now, the other party has fixed the gap and is hiding in the immortal aperture. That place is easy to defend but hard to attack. I have no methods to break in. It is not too late to salvage the situation. Maybe I can talk to him. Right, I still have his sword path immortal Gu with me. This is a negotiation chip. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible.